Roger that.
All good.
Okay, yep.
Is
We're up.
Sullen here? Sullen is here. Let me just register him and unmute him. There you are, Sullen. This is why we
Thank
said
you.
come and get your shit sorted before. But
Sorry,
yeah,
we just wrapped up about 20 minutes ago, and I had to go take care of some stuff before I got tied into another thing.
it's perfectly fine. I know you were busy with your capital industrial roundtable. How did that go, by the way?
Oh, and it went pretty good. It was a little smaller because we had a lot of people that signed up that were in the group, but that couldn't make it. But I mean, we had a lot of good discussion. Obviously, we went right up till like 20 minutes before this one, and I was like, all right, let's wrap it up because some of us got to take bio breaks before we get tied into another 2-hour-long meeting.
Yeah, and the discussion in Discord in text itself was good as well. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry I didn't make that one. I'm on call this weekend, and I updated the firewall, and it decided to break after 2.5 hours when I had got home again. So I had to go out again,
Yeah.
which is just so much fun.
Looks like people
Yeah,
are still joining, so we will hold off until 21:05. After that, I'll start the recording, explain the format, and we'll go ahead.
Yeah,
Make
I mean, I
sure
wouldn't be.
to, if you're responding to someone in text, make sure you read it out, as I'm going to be publicating. Publicating? Is that a word?
Yeah.
Publishing.
That's it.
Public.
Yeah,
I
I'll
mean,
be
it's a word,
publishing
but
the-
it's not the word you want.
It is now.
It is now. I'm going to be publishing the audio-only log as well, so it would be beneficial if we don't respond to questions that the listener will not hear.
Yeah, I was gonna say for whoever it was that missed the industrial capital thing, don't worry, I'm probably gonna have another one after the summit and after they release more information. That was just because this is the last time we'll get a chance to talk before the summit.
Yeah, that's why a lot of this kind of interaction has been so close to the summit, because we've just realized that it's probably best to start talking about that before we go and address
Right, yeah.
CCP on topics that we don't know quite as much about.
Can I just say that I may have not been paying attention as much, but I thought I have, and you guys have been doing a fantastic job, especially in comparison to previous CSMs, to make sure that you have the voice of the people before you go to the summit. That I have not seen quite a push in previous CSMs for that kind of feedback gathering.
I resent that remark.
Especially Mike. Mike just goes in and thinks that he knows
that remark
everything.
Or represent that remark.
I think more to the point, it's just that, people have complained quite vocally about the fact that CSM is not representative of the public. And I think that's made us kind of reflect on the realities of that we don't know as much as we possibly could about certain areas of the game. And as such, we've gone out of our way to try and talk about those, find people who do know about those parts of the game and get their opinions. For example, I've done two high-sec roundtables, despite the fact that I don't go to high-sec to do anything but shop. I'm interested in getting as much information about it as I can, because I feel that's very important to talk to CCP about.
Likewise, I don't own Oracle, but I know a lot of people who do.
Exactly. This is why we've always said that you don't vote for a CSM member based on, what they do or what they know. You do it based on how well you think they can find stuff out and how well they can communicate.
And how well they will represent you when the time comes at the summit.
Oh yeah, and that of course.
That's
Anyway,
been kind of my ongoing joke, just because of the fact, people talk about the alphas and how they can be taken advantage of. If you don't think that the CSM has not brought up every scenario, I mean, it's like an ongoing discussion, like exactly how veterans will take advantage of certain situations with those.
yeah, I should have an article that will be coming out soon, kind of raising some more points there and wanting some more discussion. But it is
You said that
21:05.
2 days ago.
Yeah, I did say that 2 days ago, and then Nidan decided he was going to push my article back, so I called him a prick.
It's obviously censorship.
can
Oh,
verify
obviously.
you got pushed off for my article instead.
I know. Ashtarothi, more important than the CSM. Anyway, so I'm going to attempt to start the recording now. Like, give me a second here whilst I try and figure out how to do that. As I know there is a way to do it. There it is.
User has left the
It's
channel.
self-recording.
Let me just change my output folder because otherwise I'm gonna kill my hard drive in like 20 seconds. And there we go.
Oh, I'm actually also recording the video, I'm pretty sure. Yes.
So you guys should have got a confirmation that I'm recording now. I'm just gonna do a quick test here of like 10 or so seconds of audio, so if a couple other people could talk.
Blah, 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 blah.
So
Thank you
guys,
very
there's this
much.
awesome podcast called On Grid. You should totally listen to it. And that's all I can think about to say.
Robble.
Okay. What the hell was that, man?
Well, at least now we have the extreme.
Jesus fucking Christ. Okay, well,
You're
we're gonna
welcome.
start recording now, so everyone be on your best behavior. Hello guys and welcome to the CSM PvE Town Hall. We are going to be discussing probably a myriad of topics today. Just going to be going over things in general. Just try and ask a bunch of questions. The general format we're going to be doing is we're going to ask a question to you guys, and then you can X up in that channel if you want to be unmuted to help answer it, or you can write out a text answer and we will try and read it out. Probably do some back and forth on certain points, ask a few more questions tangentially related to it if we think of anything that we'd like to know. And more people, if you like dissent, please make sure to let us know with if you have differing opinions, and we will try and get a good conversation going there. With regards to moderators, we've got 5 moderators present. We've got Ashtarothi, myself, Jin'taan, Steve Ranukin, the judge, and Titus Talang. 2 of those are not CSM members. 3 of them are. So we're
We
going to be.
also have a Sullen sitting.
Oh, Sullen, yeah, we need to drag him into the channel, don't we? Sorry, my apologies.
Oh god.
Just
Yep,
reading off
I'm
the
here.
channel list. And Mike will probably be helping us out anyway, as the elder statesman of HiSec.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I'd like to start off with group PvE. So specifically, I'd like to ask about just like a general overview of incursions. Like, how do people feel the differences between high, low, and nullsec incursions are right now?
Can I start with a small thing?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I've heard from a lot of incursion folks. Incursions are one of the things I do. That the scout sites are hardly ever run because they're not made for starting out. You got to have high-end ships even to get into that. And it'd be nice to rewrite, cut the reward, but make it so that even alphas could run the scout site with 5 or 6 people getting together, and make it a nice taste of what incursions are, so that they want to subscribe, want to run the bigger ones, leave the bigger ones as is, but leastwise ease off a bit on the scout so they don't wipe out a team of 5 people unless they're blinged out to the max.
Okay, I can agree with that. So what is this general state of HiSec incursions right now? Are they I know that they're being heavily run, but is there any issues with them that we can talk about, or things like that, besides the obvious? Because one thing I wanted to bring up is, do people feel that the income is balanced to the risk of the activity?
I always have a problem with that question, in that it's similar to a lot of Eve. If you do the work and the preparation and the effort, you minimize the risk, but then you are getting the ISK for the effort, as opposed to ISK as always being a coin toss and a gamble. It's like saying large organizations in nullsec shouldn't be allowed to mine moons because it's no risk, because they have all the networks in place and all the intel in place to be able to see if there's a risk happening. They make it safe, but they get the money because they work to make it safe. If the incursion communities have worked hard to make it something they know how to do you then punish them because they've made an effort? And if they were stupid and lost every other fleet, then you'd be happy with their income?
Okay, that's a very good point. I'll rephrase that. Do you feel that the income is balanced to the effort of the activity then?
Well, I actually kind of want to reinforce what Mike just said, which is that, you know, the issue is, or the thing that I would like to point out is that there are people who do not run incursions who can. And there are people where if you ask them if they're running incursions, they say no, and they cite reasons like they're a bunch of stuck-up people, or they only require the best, or, you know, whatever. I would like to remind everyone that one of the principal design goals of incursions was to be a raid instance, which, especially at that time, not a raid instance, but a raid environment, which at that time, raiding was considered to be kind of top-of-the-line stuff. You were expected, if you wanted to participate in that content, to be an elitist jerk. And so the fact that incursion people can be elitist jerks and get done with it, and get rewarded for that behavior, or, you know, be able to have that play style, which is fine. But other people still have other competitive options for gaining ISK that doesn't force them to be part of a game style that they don't want to be in. I think that would be the real problem when it comes to the balancing of ISK. If it's people are doing incursions that don't want to be, but are doing only, and don't want to put up with that play style, but only are doing so because the other options are so much less attractive ISK-wise.
Okay. So what I'm getting from this is that incursions are more balanced around like the kind of the barrier to entry almost. Is the barrier to entry an issue that creates elitism? Do you feel? Do people feel?
Yeah, it does. Because if they expect you to show up in a blinged out fit, then you either have to buy a Plex and cash it in or have earned your way up. It depends on the fleets too. There are a lot of different incursion communities, and people tend to only look at one or two of them and then fail to pay attention to the fact that there are communities that will take newbies in. I was in a incursion yesterday where there was a guy a week and a half old flying with us, had no clue about a lot of the stuff. He actually shot at a yellow while he was in fleet in an incursion and could have drawn the wrath of a lot of bad on us. But the FC didn't drop him. They just explained calmly and rationally why that was a bad thing, and we kept our eyes open for the next 15. The complaint that they make too much money is usually made by people who don't run incursions, although they're welcome to come and join in on the incursions and even compete for them. And there are the very elite, super blinged out, you know, we will do this by the numbers and we will make over 100 million an hour. And there's others that do it fairly casually. They still make 60 million or 70 million an hour, but that's an hour's effort. And if it got chopped a little, I wouldn't mind a balance pass looking at it, but not to the point of, if you're trying to force incursioneers to go into low and null, I'd say up the ante there, not chop the ante in high sec. A lot of the people I've flown in incursions in high sec are low sec and null sec entities who are saving up for their next Titan through running incursions. So it's not a high sec only, it's only the Care Bears who run incursions. A lot of PvPers run incursions and do that to pay for their PvP for their losses.
So, do you not think that could potentially be a problem though, in that they're not encouraged to take part in PvE in spaces that they control or that they live in? Is that an issue?
Well, that's a choice that they've made, but the thing is, how are you going to address it? Are you going to cut the high-sec incursions to a point where they're not worth running, or increase the run of it in their own space where make it worth taking the risk that you can get dropped in. The thing is, one ship can go in and jam at the appropriate time, or pop in null, pop the Logi, and watch an entire fleet get wiped out. It is a very high risk operation in a place where PvP can happen. Hell, a ganking team can really ruin an incursion fleet if they do it right.
So
Okay.
Poplar Row in the chat has a really good counter argument, and I'm just going to read the whole thing because it's kind of a very strong opinion that I've seen a lot within the game, which is the activity of the incursions themselves have essentially no risk because it's a solved problem. Low and null is the risk comes from the space itself, and that the ISK versus effort is not balanced in HiSec. The barrier to entry for these incursions is actually completely enforced by the groups themselves. That the incursions do not actually require that tier of equipment, but the barrier to entry is not a reflection of their difficulty or a lack of sites or something, but rather the community itself basically pushing itself to its extreme.
What is the problem with somebody forming a VG out of cruisers, as Poplar said, and running it then? They're welcome to it, just they won't run it at maximum, as he said, solved content. But there's nothing to stop them from doing that.
I think that the question, I believe Jin'taan was the one saying it, right? About saying that people should live, or should people do stuff within their own area? I think that that's an interesting question, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about the comparative value of things, right? So if I want to be able to do exploration, but I don't do exploration and I instead do incursions only because incursions is worth that much more, then that might be a problem. If somebody would like to work their own fields, but instead are going with incursions because it's so much less of a hassle or something, then that might be a problem. I think that a lot of the people that play incursions because they like that kind of high tier PvE, super serious gameplay. But I think that there's also people who feel forced to do it for the money.
Okay, Jen and Sullen, you're both unmuted. Would you like to interject here?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I think it says something when you have a lot of the FCs for these incursion groups are actually nullsec FCs coming, not all, I don't want to say all, but I actually personally know several that are actually nullsec FCs that come and run incursion groups because, plain and simply, it's easier for them to make more money doing that in HiSec than it is for them to do anything in nullsec. So I think that's kind of the point he's trying to make, is that there's kind of an issue when it's like it's not worth it for you to even run the PvE and make the money in the area that you own, because it's easier for you to just go to HiSec and do it and make more that quicker and easier there.
Personally, I think that the issue regarding someone saying that you should be able to do them for more benefit in nullsec and lowsec is that that's not an exact parity. It doesn't matter where in HiSec an incursion spawns, because you are able to some degree to locate easily, relocate easily between incursions, unless it's in a HiSec like pocket surrounded by lowsec.
Yeah, I responded in the chat, but if I could respond here.
Jen, can I actually?
Yeah, go with Jen.
Someone else X'd up, so I'd like them to talk. Jen, A side, would you like to talk, please? Or I've unmuted you, so you should be able to talk.
If you can't talk, type and I'll translate it through.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was hitting whisper for some reason.
No worries.
Yeah, I mean, what I've always said, the incursions aren't as they aren't horrible, but they, you know what I'm saying, they kind of distort things. You know, like you said, there's a lot of nullsec people that are doing them instead of being in their own space. And one of the things that happens is that, you know, you're making a lot of ISK, not the most that you can make, but you're making a lot of ISK in the safety of HiSec that you then take out the nullsec and turn into ships which nobody can disrupt unless they go into, you know, unless they organize their own thing to pop the mom or whatever in nullsec. But what happens is you get a lot of people in high sec who might want to, you know, run incursions, but they can't compete with the people from nullsec who have the ears to get the bling ships. I mean, some new guy in a maelstrom, you know, who's an FC going to pick? A new guy in a maelstrom or a nullsec guy in a fully dead space fit Macarial? So you end up having high sec content that in some ways is shut off from high sec people, and you got nullsec people running it because they can afford to.
Okay. This actually leads. Oh, sorry. Does someone else want to say something? I knew someone else. I interrupted. Who was that? You can talk now, dude. I know I interrupted someone to get Jen's opinion. So.
Oh, that was me. I'm typing it out though.
Oh, okay.
Can
Well,
I
this
add,
actually-
can
Yeah,
I
yeah,
add
go
one
ahead.
nice thing? One thing that I've talked to the Incursion community before about this prior to another summit, and something that a lot of them agreed on would be nice if it was less of a solved problem, if they did a rewrite or put some randomness into it, so it actually demanded something other than a rote Otuni, now shoot the Nyarja. You know, if it demanded somebody paying attention and actually flying better than just going through something you can write a recipe for.
Yeah, that would really require a random element to it, because if you didn't have the random element, it would be a solved problem within a matter of days.
But
unless you keep changing it, so
But-
the randomness would be needed.
So, okay, I was a high-end raider back in vanilla WoW, right? So I really can appreciate incursions, and I find them fascinating. I just haven't had the time to really dedicate to them yet. But I think that gameplay is something that can be very powerful. When incursions first came out, it was a very exciting process to go through the solving that puzzle. So the issue is that in traditional raiding, they present to you a series of challenges, usually about 10 to 12 different challenges, and the community works their way through it. And then nowadays there's like a hard mode and all that other stuff, but whatever. But either way, however you do that content, and then within about 6 months, they just shuffle it up again. They bring out a new dungeon, and all that does is kind of shake up the content. You're still going after 10 bosses, you're still doing the same kind of stuff, but now all the rules are different, just a little bit. And that is important because there's this journey that raiding groups go through from facing challenge, being punched by challenge, figuring out the challenge, solving the challenge, reaping the rewards from the challenge. And that cycle is very compelling gameplay. But right now we're broken in reaping the rewards of the challenge, and we've never returned back to the beginning.
Okay, so how would more variation and random elements being introduced to incursions be taken? Would it be more interesting if it required an FC an incursion FC? And I say this as someone who has FC'd incursions previously and knows how much of a relative list going down a list activity it is. Do you feel that it would be more interesting if you had to make decisions based on what the site spawned? As to what ships you needed or something similar to that, where you would scout an incursion site, decide what you needed for that version of the site, and then there'd be a random element to the spawns after that as well to keep you on your toes, sort of like a more variant activity.
I mean, I have
Would
an
that
answer for
be-
you, but Ransu just X'd up, so I don't know if he has an answer for you or something else.
I will unmute them. There you go, I've unmuted you, Ransu. You also need to unmute yourself as you have started in the muted state here.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so it was more just a response to Astarothi and just a question as well. Because I think I agree with a lot of what he was saying about creating new, like the challenges of the raid groups that go through figuring out the new dungeons, that sort of thing. And if we could get more randomized content or more procedurally generated content, then that gives an advantage to the more organized groups, which I think is good because they have to solve it themselves. And if it changes, the people that can figure out how it functions first are the ones that can take the most advantage of it. So I think that's good. The concern I have with that is that, I mean, from what I've heard with CCP's dev tools for creating static dungeons, they're very hard to use and they're very difficult to create new content like on a larger scale. And I'm wondering the question is more of what they're doing with the new Drifter AI and revamping those tools so that they can do that. Is that something we need to worry about when we're suggesting these sort of ideas, or is it we just kind of pose it to them and then it's up to them to solve those issues?
That actually raises a very interesting point. Who here has participated in Drifter incursions? Do you have anything you'd like to say about the experience with those?
So
I thought they were really good entry level because you could do them in caracals and ospreys and scythes. So you could do them. They were once people kind of figured them out a little bit, they were doing them in a lot cheaper ships, and so there was a lower barrier to entry. And if you even think to the alpha clone that's coming out, I think that's something that alpha clones could bring to the smaller sites.
Do you feel that the Doomsday effect and that requiring cheaper ships was a good pressure to put on incursions, or do you feel that that was a negative thing?
I personally thought the Doomsday was a little excessive. They were doing quite a bit of alpha damage just on their own. But
Yeah.
I mean, that content's gone, so we're kind of.
You still have some of it in Wormhole Hive Ops, which is something I participate in occasionally.
Personally, I don't like any mechanics that forces you to lose ships.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think that is, well, and I know they were playing around with that towards the end in the Drifter incursions. There was a theory where if you were, or not a theory, but it was stated by CCP Affinity, if you were in a fast enough, small enough ship, you could actually get away from the Doomsday, and that was kind of one of the things that people started doing towards the end. So they did want to kind of, the key thing that I remember they were saying was they wanted it to be possible, but not gameable. Not just like a default, oh, I just do this thing. I press this button at this moment and then I get away with it. So it's a challenge that I know that they were working on.
Perhaps they could give each drifter a randomized tracking score or something. I don't know. I don't like the idea of adding more random elements to something like that, which is already pretty voodoo magic. But Drifter Incursion, do people feel that Drifter Incursions were a good experience then? Were they entertaining to run? I'd like people to. Yeah, people just talk or X up or type in the channel.
Well, I can just say while other people are Xing up and whatnot, I will say that I didn't run any Drifter incursions myself because Ash has some sort of weird role-playing thing against doing that, so I didn't get a chance to do it, but I talked to a lot of people who did, and from my understanding, people had fun with it, but the lack of significant reward killed it off pretty quick, which might have been the point, but the engagement itself seemed pretty nice for a lot of the people that started doing they still do the tours into Drifter space every week, I think, to go through the hive, and they fight the drifters there in caracal fleets.
Yeah, it's very entertaining. I take part in it.
Yeah, I think what me and Mike were talking about in the channel was, I mean, because I participated for a couple of 2 or 3 days with when TVP was experimenting with them and everything, and they were really fun. I thought they were fun, But when you got the regular Sancho incursions and you need ISK and you got to, it's time to plex and everything like that. Yeah, you go back and you do that. I mean, you go back and you do the easiest thing. That's what happens with, I think, a lot of PvE is that we do the easiest thing even though we want better because it's there.
You go to the most optimal route.
Let me ask you a question then. Would you prefer the problem be solved by making incursions less valuable, or would you rather the problem be solved by making the other things that you want to do more profitable?
The effect is the same, though.
Right, it is, but psychologically it isn't, because one makes other people more upset, or a different group of people upset, and the other just makes you happy, or makes it, hopefully.
No,
I'm not sure if you need more sources of inflation, though.
Yeah, no, not at all. And that's the conversations that we have, like on the forums a lot. It's like, well, don't touch incursions, just buff nullsec. Well, you buff nullsec, there's already too much ISK coming in, and like you can make a lot of ISK in level 5 missions and low. You can make a lot of ISK in nullsec and everything like that. There's already too much ISK coming in. The thing that we were talking about incursions, if we know the problem is that if you lower the reward, nobody will do them. That's what happened the first time that they nerfed them. So you can't really lower the reward. And reward, I don't think, is the problem. The problem is, it draws in, a certain type of people instead of being the open kind of high second, content that you would expect that people in high sec would want to do. You know, I mean, I don't know. You'd have to ask CCP Quant, but I bet you a lot of people that do incursions don't really live in high sec.
Yeah, so that goes back to kind of the whole cycle of rating that I was talking about and how we're in the end state now. Basically, the problem is that the other engagements of incursions, like, figuring things out and doing difficult stuff and all those things that made incursions awesome to begin with, are no longer present in incursions. And so all that's left is it's just a super complicated button to press to get bacon. And that I think is what causes this angst.
And that's my main problem with them is just, I of course prefer nullsec, and I live in nullsec, and I do nullsec things and everything. But for years, I ran high sec incursions, with TVP, ISN, everybody, a couple other groups. And the problem with it is that as a single pilot, it just made more sense to do that. And not, get disrupted, except when when TVP would fight ISN and popping the moms and all this other kind of stuff. And just like it goes on every now and again now. But that was the only disruption that you got. Otherwise, it was Great Isk, and it was easier for me to make a plex that way than doing it in the space that I actually lived in. And that was, I really don't think I have the answer. I can't tell you, oh, you just do this and it will be fine and everything like that. It's just, it creates a weird kind of dynamic where, you're kind of encouraged to make ISK in safety rather than go out and make ISK where you actually play. So, and the same for the low sec guys. I mean, I know low sec some low sec 9 guys that, the systems that they're in, they have level 5 missions. They're not doing level 5 missions, they're doing incursions.
Okay. So I want to break away from incursions now because we've been talking about it for about 20 minutes and I don't want to overwork the subject. It's pretty obvious that it's a very contentious issue. We're not going to reach any concrete...
Can I make one point?
Answer. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
What if we made high-seek incursions more dangerous, but required some player input for that danger to actually happen? So some way that makes interfering with high-seek incursions more effective. Like that other players interfering.
So like someone working for the Sancha, so competitive sites like that? Or...
Oh, I think that would be wonderful as long as it isn't something that you can just, as long as it's not something that you just encourage griefers to come in and say, oh, I'm just going to screw with you.
Well, yeah, but like some like phases of the site where, say, you add some mechanic that makes it very effective to jam the largely using suicide or whatever. Like I'm not a mechanics person about that, right? But if you increase the risk but don't make it automatic and just let the players be the dynamic risk that you're looking for.
Okay, so something like making it so that you can run another site which would also be profitable for you but would increase the spawns in other sites, something like that. I don't know.
For example,
Yeah, I'm spitballing here. At the end of the day, solutions aren't the issue, aren't something we want to really bring to CCP. What we want to talk about is kind of the problems with it, and I think we've raised quite a lot of those, which is great. We'll be able to talk to CCP about that during whatever PvE meeting we end up having. So thank you. But like I said, I want to move away. I want to just go on to group PvE in general. I want to ask if you guys feel that there is enough small-scale group PvE, like 2 to 5 man PvE going around in the game. Do is there room for more of it? Is there... Yeah.
Are you including things like mining ops?
No. I specifically am talking about shooting rats in with the guns because that's the kind of the most it's the most done kind of PvE. But mining ops obviously are a huge part of that. The problem is that they are by far multi-boxed. Shop SCG, would you like to talk, please? You need to unmute yourself on the server. Okay.
Yeah, so with small group PvE, you very quickly go into the realm of just multi-boxing. That stuff just gets multi-boxed like crazy. So you have to be kind of careful with that and always keep that in mind. But aside from that, I feel like there's some small group PvE, especially in, for example, wormholes. The only thing that seems to be missing for small gang PvE is this very low risk reward, guaranteed payout, incursion style site or PvE in general that you can run. There's scout incursions, but they are shit, like most people probably know. But aside from that, there's not really this safe payout thing for small gang PvE. But as I said, I think it's actually good that we don't have that because of the multi-boxing issue.
Okay.
I mean,
What
just
if-
to illustrate maybe for the CSM members that haven't run incursions, scout sites currently, it's like some scout sites have a higher EHP pool to grind through than actual Vanguard sites.
Wow, fun.
Also, they
Ouch.
spawn like 6 jammy things and the same wave. Like 6
Very good.
jammy Sancha against 5
Yeah,
people.
new genres.
No, the other ones actually, I think. They spawn like the HQ
Oh god, really?
jammies. And
Really?
they also spam fighter bombers. Like the HQ level, mothership level fighter bombers. They spawn like 2 fighter bombers in one wave.
Wow.
Yeah, scouts are weird.
Okay, so how about things like anomalies in nullsec and level 5s? Are those possible to be run in group PvE, or is it generally better to just run them in caps or AFK tars, things like that?
Well,
Um,
that's the problem really, because you've got a site that rewards, X person's worth, but you may have to run it with X plus 3 persons worth. There aren't many low stakes sites that are worth running with, 2 people when you can run it with 1.
One of the big problems is, and it goes back to, when CCP made incursions, they made, where everybody gets rewards, and the faster you do sites, well, the better reward is. Well, with the regular bounty system that applies to missions and to anomalies, you're actually punished for bringing more people in. Because I mean, yeah, you split it evenly, but because of things like overkill and like you shoot the same rat and everything like that, and wasted DPS and everything, you end up making less ISK when you have 2 people in a site than when you had 1. And a lot of people that flying null is kind of like, if you have an alt, it's worth it. But if you bring in another person, it's not worth it, because if the 2 of you just run different sites, you each make more money than if you went into one site together. So one of the things that needs to be looked at is the actual NPC bounty system and how it pays out. The original NPC bounty system that came from missions and the old anomalies, and how they pay out. And how they kind of punish cooperation. Because if you just fix that, a lot of the sites in null, like havens and sanctums, you would see more people cooperate.
Okay, but do you not worry that people would be able to abuse that by using alts? I personally feel that PvE should be more involved. So having something resembling almost,
What?
Well, let me say one more thing really quickly.
Yeah.
How everything in Eve is mixed in together, how everything affects everything else. One of the problems with alts is the fact that you have things that make it very alt friendly. Like I use a lot of drones and assigned drones and auto targeting missiles and things like that. And those are things that have nothing to do with PvE, but they complicate the situation because it makes it easier to use an alt than it does to just bring in a friend. And those things would have to be looked at, but if you wanted to fix the situation with PvE, I think.
Okay, so am I getting the? So can I? But do people feel that more small group PvE that is difficult to multi-box would be good for the game, though? That's something I'm very interested in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A suggestion just for people to think about. This is obviously blue sky thinking. CCP haven't said anything like this. How about sites where it's actually more than one site, but you need to be running both at the same time,
Right.
or very, very close together? Would that make it better for small gang PvE? Granted, you're not all in together, but you have to be acting as a group to get a higher payout than if you ran one site, then you ran another.
But that has a psychological factor that it doesn't feel like you're fighting like the same enemy because you're split up. You're not actually like next to each other. You're just in a fleet, I guess. But it doesn't have that psychological factor that you're flying together.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Or if there were things that you had to have even if it was on the same grid, you had to have some people doing this thing and some people doing that thing, where those things are different, just to make it more difficult to multi-box,
All right.
because it's not just we all shoot the same thing.
we don't even have to be hypothetical about this. This is both of those things. The dealing with multiple people in a fleet or forcing multiple people to work together and putting people in two different places are both strategies that CCP has tried in the last year. And so the question thus is, how successful was it? When the Drifter Hives first came out, they split you have to split into two groups and go one to each room and hack two cans within a minute of each other. It's impossible to do it with a single person. And
Drifter Hives
those-
are really fun.
right. So
Like, original Drifter Hives are really fun, then they got nerfed and now they're boring.
right. So again, one of the things that you have to think about is that the last year or so of the content that we've been seeing doesn't make sense as far as like they just as a thing on their own. But when you look at it as all of this was preparation for a PvE rework, then we see that they're experimenting with different mechanics. So again, earlier somebody mentioned the Drifter Doomsday and why that it sucks. So let me explain to you why it exists. The reason why is because the problem with PvE and trying to make group PvE is that if you make something good or possible for 4 normal people, then one person's going to come in a blinged out shit, and then that's going to be the standard from that point on. It's not, so because that's how people see it psychologically. So you need a mechanic that makes sure that they cannot do it by themselves in a single blinged out ship. And so what they did was they built a gun that specifically destroys very blinged out people, but is easily countered by having a small group of throwaway people. And so that's why the Drifter Doomsday exists, and that's the impact it has, or at least that's what they're experimenting with.
Okay, so I want to highlight something that was a reaction to what you said there, where someone said that these Drifter Hives were very fun until they got nerfed, and then they were boring. Does that mean that they were boring because there was less to do, effectively? The payout was reduced, and that caused the site to be less subjectively fun to you, as you did not feel you were being rewarded for your time?
No, I was not doing it for the payout. I was doing it out of interest, or my group was doing it out of interest, and there was no more challenge involved once they got nerfed.
Yeah, what was interesting about the
What
Drifter
was that-
Hives
what
was
was
that they
that
didn't
nerf?
change the reward.
Hey, can you just
Sorry.
elaborate there? What was the nerf? What was the thing that changed?
Okay, so beforehand, the way Drifter Hives work is that you enter in a starting room, and then you have multiple acceleration gates that split into 2 wings. And on each side, you have multiple rooms that you have to pass through, and in the end, they collapse again for the final Drifter boss. And the way it used to work is that on each side, there would be side rooms, which had hackable containers in them. And these hackable containers, when hacked, would open the acceleration gate in the other wing that led to the next room. So you'd need 2 groups to go into the 2 separate wings, each go into their side room, clear the room so a hacking ship could hack the container in a coordinated fashion, then quickly get your people back on the acceleration gate to be able to activate it before it closed again. It was like a 90-second time or something like that. So you'd have like the fleet sitting on each gate, and then you'd have them coordinate when they hack the can so that everybody actually gets into the next room. Because then you have to do this whole thing over again with side rooms and hacking and going back timed and going through the gate, and then you finally group up again to beat the final Drifter boss. In the recent, or not that recent anymore, changes, CCP just completely removed the hacking mechanic. There is now a site that has 2 wings, but the gates aren't locked, so you just take your entire fleet, go into 1 wing, take the gate, kill the boss, you're done.
Okay, so that's very interesting feedback. We'll bring that to CC.
Which is just really, I mean, the entire challenge is kind of removed. It's just a matter of, okay, I'm going to put 10 people in a fleet, Surg the Drifter boss, he's going to kill one of us, we can't do anything about that, and now we collect the loot. Nice, I guess.
Actually, we've solved the whole getting killed by drifters thing now.
Right,
you just
but
have to use
doesn't
armory
matter.
B cruisers. But yeah,
Yeah, I know, but we
One-
never did it after that. I heard about that, but we never did it, right? But the thing is, the problem with that is it doesn't apply to general PvE, because that was content we were doing for the interest of it, because it was interesting, because it was new, because we wanted to figure out the whole drifter thing, and because of the challenge of it. But if we were doing it for the actual ISK, or if there was an ISK pad attached to it, then of course we would prefer the nerfed version because it's easier, it's safer.
Okay. Well, that's really good to hear. I will definitely be bringing that point to CCP because I mostly did it because I know my character would do it. So for RP reasons, basically.
I wanted to also directly answer your question, Jin. They can't nerf necessarily the reward of the sites. One of the interesting things about the sites is what you get from them for a long time had no purpose whatsoever. So the value was entirely relative.
It was purely you got like a token for each site. Like you got a key from each site that unlocked the next hive in the rotation, and if you brought like the key from site A into site B final room, you could unlock the container there, and you'd get what was called an element. And there was like a different element for each hive, and it said like on the description, it is obvious this is part of something greater or something like that, but nobody actually knew, or I think even nobody knows what they're for.
So all the price came from speculation.
Yeah, exactly, right. And if you got all 6 of them, you can actually combine them or something, but like that's details. But nobody actually knows or knew what they're for. It was just a matter of, okay, I kind of want to figure out what this is about, but there's no value attached to it. So in that regard, that's why people ran it for the interest of it. But if I was running it for the ISK value, which is quantifiable, I would obviously prefer the easier one.
Okay, that's a very interesting point there from Freelancer117, where he asks, can we expect any persistence from our PvE? So, because raising the point that we've been killing Tantra incursions for years and years and nothing's particularly happening. So is that something that people would look for? Look for actual storyline, not direct storyline, but like for certain events, an impact. So say, I don't know, for the next event, it was, I don't know, Mordus Legion or something. Mordus Legion were running the event. And you could fight for either Mordus Legion or, I don't know, not Upwell, because they're part of Upwell. I don't know, the Amara Empire. I'm just running off like this is no leaks, obviously not something they've got planned. But would it be interesting for you guys if you could choose which faction you fought for effectively in an event, and then that had an impact on what happened at the end of the event? Would that increase
sure.
your what's it called?
I'd call that the dream.
Investment?
Engagement.
Yeah. Engagement, that's the word I was looking for. That's the buzzword. Thanks. Tenesk to you.
For me, that would be the dream. Like the idea that there's things going on and I can choose how I participate in it, and I can demonstrate that my participation helped mold what is going on. That is, in my opinion, the dream.
Okay,
that is why the succession trials were popular. To know that what you do changes the lore itself is important to a lot of players. It makes you feel like you left your footprints.
Okay, awesome. That was my kind of feeling as well, but I wanted to kind of ask.
Yeah, but the problem is that it's 2 different kinds of PvE we're talking about now. That's the kind of PvE where you do it for the incorporeal reward, right? That's not a quantifiable reward influencing the story. And then, but you also have the kind of PvE that you do for the ISK, because it's my way of making the money I need to blow up more ships. And for the second kind of PvE, I'm always going to choose the kind that is the most time efficient or risk efficient.
Or
while the kind
efficient.
you're discussing, while the kind you're discussing now is inquantifiables, which is like, how do I value myself maybe getting my name on some sort of vanity item? That's 2 different things.
And I think that real quickly, that's what leads to a lot of behavior in the game. CCP has put a lot of interest in PvE in the game over the last few years, and and anybody that knows me from the forums, I say this a lot, but I mean that we're still saving the same damsels and running the same havens that we've been running since 2006, because that's reliable income.
Fucking damsel.
She always in trouble.
All right. So I'm going to go the complete opposite way to the way I was talking earlier about group PvE. Do you think there's enough large-scale PvE? Would you be interested in, say, I don't know, like for at the most extreme example, 100-man incursion? Would that be interesting to you?
So many cats to herd.
It would be interesting only if it could be engaged with like having very clear different roles, right? So you could make a team of 10 people with 1 FC who is supposed to do a specific thing, and then another team of 10 with a different FC that has to do a different thing, but you're all kind of working on the same grid. So you each have their own objectives and they can work, but trying to do like one person running 100 people in order to get it done. Basically, the reason why rating went from 40 to 25 in like World of Warcraft was because managing the more people that you get to manage, the less you can manage them, and the more you're just throwing numbers at a problem. So I think it'd be interesting if you could be part of an epic thing with multiple groups all working together, but I don't know if I would want to try to lead a 100-man fleet.
Also, I don't think there is much engagement difference for an FC between FCing 10 and FCing 100. Like was said just before, the initial reaction to that was more cats to herd, but there's no engagement difference in, oh, I'm commanding 100 people. Well, cool, but there's no different gameplay between commanding 10 and commanding 100 ultimately.
That there is actually a lot as an FC. Yes, no, you're completely wrong. There's a lot of difference in the difference between scale of combat. Perhaps not within PvE, but I wonder if they could not bring
that's my point
some.
about PvE, right?
If they could not bring some of
calling...
that. No, can you?
I actually think that there's less in large scale, because when you're in smaller scale, you're actually not only having to think about the objectives of the fleet itself, but you actually can get to the point where you're micromanaging. You have to make sure that everybody is kind of doing their correct task, and because when you're dealing with that small of a scale, the piloting skill comes into it significantly higher. When you're doing 100, you're basically only looking at macro goals.
Okay.
Can I hear the end of your sentence?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I was wondering if you couldn't bring some of the things that make large scale fleet combat in EVE more exciting to say PvE. So you have EVE War that affects them. You can jam out the logistics of an enemy fleet. So you have an EVE War coordinator, and you have to have logistics. So you have a logistics FC and etc. And maybe they spawn rats that try and tackle you, so you have an anti-tackle FC, and so you have like 4 or 5 groups that are working together on one grid to take down the enemy. And Popularo raised a good point, saying that in smaller scale, each person's contribution is greater. The more people you have, the more you're there to F1, and I can accept that. Okay. Right, well, let's move on a little bit. Do you guys feel that it is fair to reward group PvE over solo PvE? This is something I'm pretty sure I'll get a unanimous answer on, but it's something that I've had a lot of people raise.
Are we talking in terms of per character, or are we talking in terms of the entire group?
As in terms of the entire group. So you say, having 5 people, you should be making more money than 5 people doing an individual site.
So per character.
Putting more effort in, you should be earning more money.
Okay, and is working with other people more effective?
Yes, it is, because I can go out and I can do a mission and I get some money, and I don't have to depend on anyone else for doing it. As you might know, I'm a relatively solo player. I don't like having to depend on other people to make my money. So I'm in 2 minds over this one.
Okay, that's absolutely wonderful. I think we got a really big productive discussion there on group PvE. So thank you all. I'm going to move on to missions very briefly here. And I want to ask people what is the state of level 4 missions currently, like in high sec? I do want to talk about NPC null sec missions as well.
They're pretty much a solved problem.
Yeah.
You can go, but with places like EVE Survival, I know exactly how I need to do this mission, and the likelihood of me losing a ship in it is minimal.
Okay, guys, just feel free to jump in here. I can trust the people who I've unmuted so far. Just go ahead and try and talk, and let's go. I haven't remuted anyone so far, and I haven't needed to, which is nice.
Yeah, I was just saying that level 4 missions is basically embraced as work, right? You come in, you punch in your ticket, you do your work, and you get paid your ISK. It's not necessarily very risky. It's not supposed to be. I think the power fantasy that comes from it is the idea that you're just fighting a bunch of stuff and doing, killing all these guys, and you get paid for it. But really, it's just you go and you do your work because you need to get paid. And I don't know necessarily that's a bad thing. I think that there's a purpose for that in the game. That kind of I'm not really risking anything, but I've earned this kind of relaxed way of grinding money isn't necessarily bad.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same as things like anomalies. Other than having someone else come into it, they solve problems. You know what's going to happen, so you are going to make your money. And I don't think it's a bad thing. You've got people who play EVE and all they do is run missions, and that works for them. They want to do that. It gets us into the game. It gets people, well, would everyone be buying officer mods if you didn't have the people in HiSec running, buying purples for their blinged out ship?
And it's not even a niche. Like, that's an entire game style. Like, there's a lot of people that play that. So if you were to just say that
30% of the game, yeah.
Yeah, so if you just said, oh yeah, missions suck, let's completely change it and make it harder. This notion that PvE is inherently made better by making it harder or making it more risky, and that's the best way to improve it. Yeah, well, more engaging is different. I mean, you can have things be engageable or be interesting to do, but if you try to make it more engaging by making it more annoying or more dangerous, like for instance the drone changes, right? I don't think that made missions better. It made missions a little bit more complex, but I don't think it hit their goals necessarily as much. However, I think if there was like interesting things to happen that require some coordination, that might be cool. But again, if you do too much, you're going to do like what's happening with the Rorqual people, where it's like, I get what you're doing, but you're completely changing the gameplay totally. So what happens to my gameplay? It's now being removed. And unlike, POS boosters, these are active players. People are actively missioning. So you don't necessarily want to damage that gameplay too much.
Would mining be made better if some asteroids randomly exploded, killing any mining vessel in the belt? Does an increase in challenge?
That's a very good way to put it, Mike. I appreciate
Does the increase in challenge make the game better, or the increased chance in loss make the game better just because the people know what they're getting when they do missions?
Isn't that how Makotsit works, or however you pronounce it?
Makotsit.
Right, but that makes it a different type of mining, and it is.
Okay, so would adding more mission variations or mission variation within the mission to make it more difficult to run or something like that, or not more difficult, more you have to change the way you move in a mission or what you use potentially? I don't know.
Make
how
you
you
pay
go about
attention
it.
and make you fly the ship?
Well,
yeah, something like that.
There's a lot of variation in missions, but again, it goes back to the same thing as Incursions, and the fact that the stories and what they said at the very beginning. I don't remember who said it, but we've been saving the same damsel, so the narrative hasn't changed, and you can change the narrative and tell different stories, and then that's a way to make it engaging without necessarily trying to fix the problem by making it more deadly.
Yeah, if you did want to make significant changes to missions, I think the place which would be the safest place to do it is in things like extra rooms. So if you want to go and get more of a benefit from a mission, you can. You can go off and do the extra room. Or if you just want the ISK, you don't have to. You can just stop, go get another mission.
To a certain extent, that happens with escalation, Steve.
But
Yeah.
I mean, if you just want to add more content, then the obvious question is, who's going to create all that content?
Well,
yeah.
Hey, briefly, let me add one thing. And one of the things that I've suggested about missions is one of the great things about anomalies is that they give escalations and they give these random, where you can go off. And a lot of people that live in null that do anomalies, they get an escalation, they sell it to somebody, and they get the bookmark for them, and they don't even worry about it. It's just extra income for them. I think that missions could benefit from something like that. In fact, missions, as I recall, used to have something like that. You would kill a rat, and you would get like this little, what was it, pirate log thing in it that said, "Hey, go to this place, and you can find something." And something like that would help to just, for the people that want for it to be mixed up a little bit and get bored with it, they'd have that. And the people that didn't care, they could just sell it to somebody.
Would it be interesting if we made those, say, mission escalations a group activity? Like maybe the new group activity that people seem to be clamoring for could be an escalation from high-sec missions, to be run in high-sec, low-sec, or null-sec. Obviously, that could work from low-sec as well.
That's a bit awkward, though, because if you're assuming that people are running missions single, and then now they have a thing, and this is one of the or this happens with escalations. Like, you have to now find a team.
They could just sell them.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't want to run it as a group, then you sell it, you treat it as extra income, but if you're a group, you can buy them from other people and make more money than you spent on the bookmark.
But the other problem is that people that want to work as a group have to first work solo in order to get the stuff for the group, and it kind of, like I said, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's a bit awkward.
They could buy it from people that are running solo, because there's plenty of people that just run solo.
That's fair.
I feel
Can I make a point?
I just come from the argument of that EVE is a social game, and adding more social kind of content to the game is a good idea.
It might be necessary to have some sort of centralized or organized way of actually trading those missions, though, because bookmark sales are not particularly secure.
Yeah, I don't know, making them keys or something.
Yeah, but then you lose like the random element of the location, I guess, but might not be relevant.
I don't know.
But like,
I'm just
I don't know, like
obviously
a
this isn't...
bounty board where you can sell like information about pirates or whatever. Like,
well, again, we're not here to fix to invent solutions, just state problems.
Yeah.
There was somebody else who said that they had a point.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention about that raised a really good point about selling dead sites or escalations where you actually have to go to the site and bookmark it and then come back, and then you have to trust the person selling it to have the bookmark. If there was some way that we could transfer those sites to another person for a price, right? Like, so say it shows up in your journal, and then you can say, oh, this person wants to buy it, or like somebody mentioned a bounty board, and you can put it up there and have some kind of exchange. I think that would be a lot better in terms of a social aspect of trading those kind of sites around.
I also want to remind everybody that the Scope Network was a thing, and so now they have additional vectors to inject PvE content into the game beyond just mission running. So
I'm going to cut you off here because we're going to actually tackle the Scope Network as a whole topic of its own a little later on. Because it's a big thing, and I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, I'm not jumping into the Scope Network right now. I'm just while we're discussing missions, be aware that there are other content delivery systems for what used to only be delivered through missions.
So just talking about missions again, it sounds like a lot of the complaints are that they're very static, and we've figured them out, and everything's solved. Including, we're having a little bit of a sub chat on that in the CSM chat about burner missions, where they've all been solved. People go on CC to do them. People had threads on the forums where they figured out specific ship builds to fix them, to do them. People bring Griffin alts. So, maybe that's the thing to bring to CCPs, to say we'd like more content that's not as static, I hate using the buzzword of procedural generation, but something that you can't write an EVE survival guide for it.
I personally,
at least that would get people engaged more in exploring that content.
I would much rather see better tools for them to develop actual stories than just relying it on procedurally generated stuff. Like, I think that what you could do is almost like a Diablo thing, where like you have events, like small blocks of things that can happen, and then like in the app or at runtime it loads them together to form a story. But ultimately, I think that it's important for the missions to have a narrative, and so honestly, this is just one of those things where we need to have more missions developed, and you can say who's going to do it, but somebody has to, because that's what keeps missions fresh.
But that is a lot of development time invested. I mean,
well, that's only because the tools suck.
You have games like World of Warcraft where there's entire development teams working on that kind of thing. Like, that's their entire game.
Well, it isn't their entire game, but yeah.
So I want to get back to like the kind of more casual stuff. Are missions actually fun to run casually? Is it like, obviously a lot of people do it, but is it fun to just go and run a mission?
For some people, definitely.
It depends on the person. Like, I like running missions even to this day because I do them with different things and do different ways. Same way I do Anomaly the same way. In nullsec, I try different things. You know what I'm saying? But most people, they find what works and they just stick with that forever. And then they get tired of it, and then they quit the game.
Yeah, the level up your Raven approach to EVE Online.
Mhm.
I'm glad to hear that. I only wanted to ask that question just in case everyone was like, no, I hate missions, because I was like, great, now I've got to find an entire mission roundtable and do a mission roundtable so I can find the people who actually do enjoy that kind of gameplay and get their views on it and why they find it fun. Because that'd
Yeah.
be hard.
An important thing with the level up my Raven kind of gameplay, you do get people that are like that, and you're probably not going to change what they want to do, because they like the I win, I beat stuff, I keep winning, and you're not going to change that for them. Will they stick around forever? No. But are they an important part of the game? I would say yes. There are people in space that stuff can happen with.
Except the
Some
current
of them
mission.
are
The current mission gameplay encourages them to actively avoid other players. Because another player is nothing except a threat vector.
Yeah, but they are a target for the other players to go after.
Go to the
But-
SOE sections where the level 4s are running. It's about 2/3 mission runners and 1/3 people looking to find a bling ship to interrupt and go after. I ran missions for years, so I'm a veteran mission runner, and I would love to see new ones, or even an option to a procedural agent that would give me random stuff where I have no idea what I'm getting into till I get into it, but make it a choice so that people who want to run flat missions can, people who want some challenge can do that.
So
Yeah, the
that
problem
sounds
is
to
if you
me.
always make it a choice, then you're always gonna have people just prefer what they're used to just because of inertia.
That's fair, but I think giving
And
people the
whichever.
option to do something more and different and interesting is a good idea.
Yeah. CCP can make good missions, you know. I mean, like Dread Pirate Scarlet, when they introduced a few new missions, what, in 2011, 12, whatever, they can make good missions, you know. Saying it's just, I understand what people are saying. It's like they're not particularly tooled up to make missions every quarter or something like that. So, you know, what the answer is, I don't really know. But I
Okay.
know that there is a reason why even those of us who prefer different PvE, you know, like I say, we you know, we end up saving the same damsel and everything like that because it's reliable. And any kind of PvE that you make that you want people to run has to also have a level of reliability when it comes to rewards. Otherwise, it's just wasted development time.
Okay, so speaking of new missions, I'm going to go on to burner missions here. Is getting to use smaller ships in like high level PvE good or further interesting? Is that something you want to see more of? Like more PvE that you could potentially run in frigates that isn't super bad?
I really enjoyed the burner missions while they were like possible to do quite simply. But I found the problem was I'd try 4 or 5 fits that I thought would work, lose every time, and then go, why am I wasting money on this? Because I could just go to the forums and get it solved for me.
One thing that I would like to see more of, and one thing that's awesome that people don't talk about, like, is the Pirate Epic Arc missions, the Angel one, and what's the other one, Baristas? Because I do those like in cycles every 6 months or something like that. But there's what CCP call them was speedboat missions. You know, saying you use small ships for them, and there's good rewards at the end. They take you around, a good fair bit of space. You have to get to where the missions are and everything like that, and then when anybody that's done the Pirate Epic Arcs knows there's actually interesting content inside the missions. Like, I mean, there's a Drake with guns in one of the Garistas missions, and I was like, what the hell, you know?
I mean, two ideas I have about that. One, you said speedboat. What about missions like a distribution mission where you get more payout the faster you get there? Not just like a flat bonus for making it fast enough, but literally, if you make it in 10 minutes, you get X amount. If you take 15, you only get X half, and then it like goes down really quickly. That would encourage
I
people
like
to,
that.
yeah, that would encourage people, and then like randomize the cargo size. Maybe have multiple items sometimes, some single items, some to just varying cargo sizes. So you try to find the fastest way to transport a certain size of cargo, which is not easily solvable because you can easily randomize the size. And
Well, that's
size is a
another-
parameter that's easily randomized.
Yeah, that's another. I think that's another. Building off of that, that's an important thing because I know we're talking about PvE and shooting things and everything like that, but there's a lot of content that could become from not just because most missions are shooting things, but you see like the recon mission that it's about getting through it quickly or whatever. One of
Mm.
the things I think that CCP should consider is more missions that are about not so much shooting, but about evading. Getting away, getting through, speed, things like that. Yeah,
I mean,
Hey,
second
that
second
freelancer
point.
here
Okay,
just
go.
actually raises a really good issue. Sorry, a really good idea. Like I said, I don't often like solutions, but hey, what about hunting an NPC character, but it warps out if you don't tackle it fast enough, or if you're not fast enough to get to it? So that would mean that you would have to have a point to participate in the PvE, which implies that your fit is at least somewhat PvP capable. Kind of
that would
like
be.
the.
I would
Go
very much like. I would very much like that, but only if it played Benny Hill music as you chasing it around the system.
ahead.
There would have to be a mechanism for you to be able to follow it,
Take
or it'd
care,
have to
Mike.
return like repped.
I mean, the other problem would just be an issue of okay, solve for PvP PvE fit with -1 mid slot.
Yeah, true. But yeah, I think that's something we're going to run into pretty much no matter what we do, is that eventually content will be solved. That's something I'm hearing kind of as an overarching issue with PvE, is that it can be solved. And I don't
I
know
mean,
if that's overall a bad thing, but
other
you know.
idea, drifter missions that start paying out less and less as more unique players start beating them. I mean, nobody's gonna post a solution on the forums if it makes them make less risk.
The other thing is that they could just, I mean, it doesn't need to be an all-at-once thing, right? So if they, every patch or every other patch, introduced 10 new missions and retired 10 old missions and don't tell you anything about which ones, it'll take us quite a while to crunch through that to even figure out what the 10 missions are, let alone, what's going on. And then you repeat that cycle.
If I could
But
interrupt.
yeah, heck, like you
Yeah,
add
no,
like
hey, can you let that guy interrupt, please?
Sorry.
If I could interrupt and point out that we were kind of meant to be talking about burner missions and we've got a bit lost in solutions.
Yeah, just like, yeah, I think we definitely got the idea that, hey, using frigates is fun because frigates are very inherently almost interesting gameplay outside of PvE. Outside of PvE, in PvE, they require more in-depth flying. So, having more PvE content that is available to frigates or destroyers or smaller ships like cruisers would be good. I think that's something that
I do have something that I want to say about that.
Go ahead.
Which is that another factor is level 4 big battleship mission running does almost nothing to teach you about actually fighting in the game. But if you have to fly around in frigates, you're at least thinking about, you might even start thinking about manual piloting and, all of those things that the infant skills that are required to eventually be a person that understands Eve. And that's an important thing for PvE to do, is to educate people about how to properly play the game in a safe environment, so that way when they go to do PvP, they don't feel completely thrown into the ice bath.
I really hate the concept of PvE fits and PvP fits. It makes sense why it happens, but I do just hate the idea about the fact that they are separate.
Okay.
That was one of the one of the goals of the burner missions, was to help, like the frigate ones, was to help try to teach people manual piloting. I'm pretty sure.
All right.
I don't have the chat.
Well, we're going to move on from missions now because we have been talking for this for quite a while again. I want to just briefly touch on level 5s. How do people feel about them offering kind of like what I see as capital PvE to the game in LoSec?
I haven't run them in a year, but I've run a number of level 5 missions with the what I'll do is I'll go to a spot that has a level 5 mission agent, and the spot that I run in, some people here probably know it, but I'm not going to mention it if you don't. It's got 2 systems on each side. I mean, 1 system on each side of it that has stations. So I just put a carrier in each station, and I have me and an alt, pull the missions, and I kind of yo-yo the standings that way. So like I use one character, and then just ignore the missions that are not in one of those 3 systems. And if it's in one of those three systems, I just pod over, just take my pod through the gate where I can't hardly be caught, and go to the carrier, undock, do the mission. I'm never in a mission site for more than 2 minutes, and even if somebody's trying to scan me down, I'm aligned to the station, whatever. And even now that, it's even easier with the way fighters are now. So, um, the thing about level 5 missions is that people don't do them a whole lot because, number one, they're not subcap friendly, and people that do missions, like to do them in subcaps. But also, because the way that they are now is like they're so incredibly blitzable that to do them any other kind of way is just inviting disaster.
If I could second a lot of that, one of the problems I have, and I have friends that do it, is that you can get 10, 20 characters, pull, 20 missions, do all the blitzable ones, reject all the other ones. You're making, billions an hour, and it's really, really good ISK, but, it's a bit of a pain compared to the rest of the space.
Yeah, like you're saying in chat there, what Steve is saying is they're a huge risk, and they're almost, unless you find a way to blitz them like I talked about, or unless you're doing them in a large group and you've got backup, they're really not worth doing, And I don't know what a solution would be and everything like that to them. It's just kind of, there's so much EHP in a level 5 mission that you have to kill, and the ones that aren't blitzable, that even with the capital ship, it's like you just hung out to dry in low sec. Maybe if, I don't know. No, scratch that. That's a stupid idea as I think about it.
So would you say
If
the
I could-
problem is there that, and I'll let you in a second, that more of the missions that are available right now need to be more viable to run, maybe by subcaps or with a small group of people?
I understand the problem with subcaps and level 5s. If you make them doable by subcaps and level 5 in a reasonable amount of time, you get people just farm them to death. I know that. But yeah, maybe if because me and my friends, we've done level 5 missions in like Ravens and things like that where you can do them quickly. It's not as good as doing it in the carrier, but uh, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, so, something maybe like I tell you what, there's a DED 1010 called the Maze in Garista Space, and one of the cool things about that is that it's a multi-stage, not a multi-stage, but it has multiple rooms in it. What, like, I've never found a level 5 mission that had that, and maybe if you had more rooms in level 5s, maybe a level 5 had maybe 10 rooms or something. So maybe take a level 4 mission and put like 5 extra rooms on it and make that a level 5, and then you can have people go in and do that, and they could maybe notice when people are trying to scan them down or something like that, and it would still be, you could still get caught, but it's still engaging.
If there's 10 rooms, there's nobody gonna get caught.
So,
Well,
out of curiosity, are
right.
you talking about running them solo or as a group?
Me and my buddies, there's 4 of us and everything, and we've run them in subcaps. We've run them in Ravens, Typhoon Fleet issues.
But like when you're doing your capitals, you run them solo or as a group?
Oh yeah, solo, everything. Yeah.
See, and that's one of the things that I think is interesting about level 5s, because from everything I understand about them, they were originally intended to be group content. So I think that this is actually that example of what we were talking about earlier about the problem is that if you develop decent group content, it then becomes assumed to be solo content for stronger people.
When they were in high sec, you could see people running them in groups. I mean, I've seen videos of that.
Okay.
Yeah, but when they
Is
were
that a
in high
bad
sec,
thing though?
No, it's not.
when they were in high sec, I used to run, you could run them in a group and everything like that, but one of the most common things, and what I would do, what I learned from other people, was I just run them in a rattlesnake, was tanked all to hell, and sit there for an hour because it was worth it.
And do we really want to encourage more valuable PvP to move to high sec?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Anyway, so
what,
just going to
sorry?
touch on one final mission issue, which is NPC nullsec missions. I don't know if anyone here has experience with that.
I do.
I do. I think they're in a pretty good place.
I do too.
Okay.
I mean, the the nullsec level 4, and that's one thing I want to touch on is the different levels of missions, because I mean it's kind of like level 4s are the only ones, unless you blitz level 3 sometimes, level 4s are the only ones that matter across whatever space you're in. And it would be nice if, like, there was a choice. It's kind of like, well, I don't feel like doing level 4s. I want to use a smaller ship. I'll do level 2s today, and that'll be worth my time.
The only thing with NPC null missions is that I don't find the storyline missions to really be worth your time. It gives you a standing bump, and there's maybe like a one-time in the game item that you can get from one of the agents, but there's not a lot of motivation to really do those. So I mean, sometimes you run them, sometimes you just skip them.
Yeah.
Okay.
One cool thing about nullsec NPC null missions, though, is that some of the missions are very, very different. Like, to me, the best mission in the game is Concord Blockade. And I'd love to see more missions like that. I mean, it's tough as hell, especially if you're in a single ship. It can be tough. You hit the wrong trigger, you're dead, but it's worth it,
Okay.
If I could point out, somebody earlier was talking about mission escalations, and that's really what storyline missions are. They take you to a different station, they drag you around a bit.
Maybe we just need more value there then, because they're really not worth it at this
But
point.
we can't
Yeah.
sell them.
Yeah, and you can't sell. But another thing about storylines is that across missions, even in NPC null, is the kind of they don't offer the same kind of wow factor as escalations, because you're going to do 16 missions and get one. Whereas with escalation, when you're doing anomalies, you never know when you're going to get one, and you pop up and it's like, holy crap, I got one, yay!
Okay.
Mission escalations would be something good, yeah, to just throw some
Alright.
variation into it.
Well, I'm going to move on from missions now, and we're going to talk about the scope network, which was the latest addition to PvE in the game. So I want to get kind of a watermark. How do people find like sites with regards to difficulty? Were they too easy, too difficult? What? How was that?
I'll be honest, I didn't really like the scope network at all. I found it like ridiculously grindy for no reward. In terms of sites, the shipyard one, which was the one you had to do all the time, it was pretty easy just to kill the central spawn, and then just walk away with just getting the loot. I'm not sure that's a good model we want to follow.
I think that the goal of that difficulty balancing is to be capable to be done by a group of alphas. And in that sense, if that is the goal, is to make it so that it is attainable by alphas, then I think the difficulty is in a really good, solid place. That's just me.
Okay. So you talked about it being grindy. So do you feel that the reward wasn't well spaced for the amount of time you spent in it, basically? Did you feel that more reward per site, with the downside of less reward after, doing X amount of sites would be better for your engagement in it, or better reason for you to take part in it?
I think the perception that you had to get, what was it, 50,000 points, and each series of 5 sites was 50 points or something, that just made me, that killed all my motivation straight away.
Okay.
Well, not straight away, but quick.
Yeah, definitely too grindy. I mean, if you look at the long road, the end reward wasn't worth the grind. In I think a lot of my group's opinion, most of us didn't bother because it just seemed like too much for not a lot of reward. And then I know there was a buff to the individual site rewards, but even they didn't have great drops.
All right.
I know
one
there was
thing,
some game plans in that.
I was doing them in low sec, and the competition between a scope network site that paid you like 10 million and a DED site that probably paid you 10 million just from effects and ratting bounties. And then, you might get 250 million or 600 million from a DED drop. There's no competition there.
Okay. So, was the actual gameplay then, the idea behind it, was it sufficiently different, do you feel, from missions or any other PvE, where that you want to do PvE that builds toward a reward? Like, was that a good idea? Was that something that you'd like to see more of, perhaps?
I actually think it's a good model for what standings could be. You do a lot of missions for a corp, and then you get a reward. And right now it's like 9.98 or 10. But a bigger reward at 4 and a bigger reward at 5, that would be good.
Okay. How do you feel about the item packs in general? Do you feel that those were a good way to distribute rewards randomly? Do you feel that that's more engaging than a loot table?
Personally, I don't. But then again, like I said in chat, I loved Crimson Harvest, and Frostline was okay, and then this last one, Shadow of the Serpent, I didn't even, after the first 3 days, I'm kind of like, screw this,
The big thing that the reward does is it makes it so that you don't have to worry about it being safe. That is the big difference. Whether or not you need to worry about making it safe, because if it was a drop, then as soon as you loot it, you now are holding the ball. So by putting it in a UI element that you can redeem at any time, you are removing the "can I get it home" element out of the equation.
I think for the long-term reward, that made sense, and I think that was good. For that reason, yes. But because there is with Scope Network, there was a lot of people that would camp the site, loot the the one drop and run away with it, and it would disperse in PvP. And I think that's a good thing, and we should keep that. I got into a lot of PvP in the Crimson Harvest, contesting sites against people, and I think that's a good thing we should keep.
Yeah, I did too, and I actually won a couple. I don't know how.
Well, but I think the gameplay of loot and then time your looting so that you are aligned with your loot and then can just warp off is kind of boring. I mean, if we provided some way for the actual owner of the site to engage in PvP voluntarily and be able to fight the loot back, that would be kind of good. I don't really like the snatch it and then quickly run away before anybody really can do anything gameplay. That feels like the owner of the site has no impact on it.
Lock him. If he goes suspect, then you get to tackle him again.
Yeah, but if they're aligned, you still don't get to tackle them before they warp off.
You have a false assumption in your statement, which is that there's an owner of the site. There is no owner of the site. Each person gets to decide how they want to tackle this problem. And so one person has decided that No, because one person has solved the problem by bringing the ship to deal with the rats. The other person has solved the problem by ignoring that and trying to leech off of other people. The question is which one of those strategies wins, and I don't think it should be won by having the rules rule out one of the two strategies.
No, I'm not saying it should rule out, but in high sec, the gameplay is simply, I'm going to be aligned, I'm going to click loot, they can't do anything to me before I click loot, and after I click loot, I just warp off. There is no interaction there.
He has a point that if we wanted to spur more PvP, then like the ESS, in nullsec has a warp disruption bubble around it, or it points you.
You can't warp 5 seconds after looting. You're done.
Right. In order to collect the reward, you have to be pointed by the structure to loot it. So there's options that if the problem that we're stating is that other than running the site yourself, if you want to contest, it's more difficult to contest sites because the mechanics don't allow you to have a chance to fight that person.
Right.
I think that's something we could bring up.
But here's something
and then
that's
let
really
CCP solve it.
Here's an important counterpoint to that, though. So by allowing players to be annoying to another player in high sec without actually combat being involved, what happens is that you go, well, I really hate that people are doing this to me. How can I fix that? And the answer is, do it in areas of space in which you can do something about it. And so that is an option. If you want to be able to take on the people that come to mess with your place, there are plenty of places in space that are also spawning those sites.
Really the vision we have for high sec, though? Like, there are people that do annoying things to you and you can't do shit about it because it's high sec? That's silly.
I mean, first of all, welcome to high sec. I mean, you've got suicide ganking, you've got minor ganking. That's the whole point, is that people are forcing...
But that has counterplay. Suicide ganking has counterplay.
This is counterplay. There's plenty of counterplay. No, I've had people... No. I've had plenty of people trying to steal my can.
Holy shit. Okay, guys, calm down. Calm down for a second. Take a couple of seconds out of here before I have to start muting people. Just breathe.
Can I?
Yes. Go ahead.
Can I say one of the ways that this problem of aligning and insta warping out that is kind of solved in some sites. The spawn container is quite large. The Serpentis 3 out of 10 has a very big station, and then when it dies, the cat is 10 no, like 2,000, 3,000 meters away from the closest you can get. So, you know, they'll be on grid and then they won't be able to align out. So that's one solution.
Yeah, but if you're, I mean, it's still a matter of get close, then align, then click loot. I still can't do anything about it before you actually click loot, and when you click loot, you warp away. So
you can.
What about the and just, you know, we're not talking about solutions here. I'm just going to quickly throw this out. Just like in NoSec, there's anomalies that you do that has a big rock around it and everything like that. It makes it hard to approach. You know, maybe if you had to manually pilot into something and then manually pilot back out to get the loot out, that might help.
There's at least one mission which has something similar. You've got to get a key out from within a rock.
yeah, but the collision in this game is so wonky.
I know.
Okay.
That is always a problem.
Well, I want to step away from this and get this whole thing about something very, very fundamental, like not being able to preemptively attack someone in high sec, because you think they're about to do something. That's just an issue that is inherent to the way the game works. And
No, but it's an issue of I can't do anything to them after they do it either because they've already warped.
What?
Okay.
The suspect
I
flag is
completely understand
meaningless
that.
if I
but...
can align to a station and just warp instantly and never actually be outside of invuln with a suspect flag.
Yeah, the thing is that if you have if you go near this, you can't align out or something, you know, through some mechanic like bumping, etc., that would impact a lot of other areas of the gameplay, and that's not good.
No, if you loot this specific container in a DAD, then you cannot warp for 3 seconds because the container implodes when you loot it and generates a warp destruction field, whatever.
Okay, but are you going to fit a point to your PvE ship so you can kill people in high sec who do that?
No, because that is actual counterplay. That is an option, right? Oh, this guy keeps stealing my sites. I'm gonna adjust my fit so I can point him and kill him. That's actual counterplay
interesting. There. I will. Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Right. While if he just aligns and insta warps, there is no counterplay. Can I do anything about this guy stealing my sites? I can not run the sites in high sec, like was said, but that's like not playing is no valid counterplay. It's just a matter of just making the game annoying.
One thing to bring up along those lines, you've got people who steal loot in missions, and their whole point is to get you to engage them.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, that's not an uncommon thing.
Yeah, but then there would be the interaction. Okay, is this guy actually trying to make me attack? Is there something for me to gain by attacking? There's dynamics here, right? While there is no dynamic in, this guy warped into my DED, still my cannon warped away instantly. I couldn't do anything. There's just disappointment there.
Okay. I agree essentially with what you're saying, but there are ways that you can limit his chances of doing that. You can not kill the spawn container until you're close to it. You know, there's no counterplay to the initial situation.
All right. Well, I'm just going to ask one last question about Scope Network here. I just want to ask if people think that the Scope Network was more effective at rewarding like chunks of gameplay, you know, like 30-minute long gaming sessions. Was that something that was benefited by Scope Network at all?
No.
As opposed to longer or as opposed to shorter?
As opposed to like shorter games.
So you're saying you're offering rewards for people playing longer periods of time?
No. I'm saying, is it better for people who want to like I want to log in, do one site, go off, and like not sit down?
So you're trying to like provide rewards for shorter sessions then?
Well, that's not what I'm saying. There was I'm just saying, yeah.
Potential sites that you can run in shorter times.
The Scope Network failed at that because you needed to do at least 5. So you had to find the 5 sites, which generally involved traveling through several systems. As far as I say, for short playtimes, it failed because you had to do them all fairly quickly because you had a maximum of generally, I think it was 24 hours to do them in, and then you restarted. So it failed at that point, as far as I'm concerned.
If there hadn't been a spawn timer, then I would have actually got a lot more points because I ran the sites, but because it cycled every 24 hours, I only ever got to like 3 or 4 instead of 5, so I ended up with like 250 points instead of 2,000, which is the number of sites I'd probably run.
The other thing with it is that the end rewards that were really rewarding the people that were able to grind the most sites. I think that was kind of I would say it was probably a negative kind of way of encouraging people, because the people that were in the top 10 to get the, I guess it was the vehement blueprint or whatever, were the people that, you know, run these as much as you possibly can to stay in the lead for that.
Do you think that was good?
I think
though?
that was negative. No, I don't.
You think that was a negative impact on the game?
I think it encouraged people that, you know, have time to sink into the game to that effect. Whereas, like you're saying, like being able to run, you know, log on and run a couple of those sites every day, you know, or to get the five missions every day. That's you know, sectioning up your game time versus people that can just do it all the time.
I mean, it's conveying the impression of, well, I'm not going to be able to know life for 3 weeks for this. I might as well not.
Yeah, sort of that.
Can
I don't think we should be encouraging people to do that either.
Can
as
I
part
ask
of the
how
gameplay.
many sites, like that Opa or whoever else got one of those top 10 blueprints, actually ran, and how many points they got? Because like if it was, you know, like 500,000 or something, they must have invested like 10 hours a day every day.
It doesn't matter what the actual objective outcome was. It's purely a matter of subjective perception. I see that there is an unlimited counter, and I go, somebody's gonna invest more time than me. I might as well not bother.
I feel like,
Yeah, like a better way to do it would have. A better way to do it was like everybody that got to the gold Erebus gets a ticket into the draws or something like that. They did that for the first Atlas, but the problem with that is then it becomes an alt game.
Okay,
right?
hold on. I think that we are answering the wrong question, because this was about how much people were engaging overall. The question is, so because of the fact that the missions fall off after 2 days, you are encouraged to get it all done at one time, or to invest it into these larger chunks as opposed to smaller chunks. So I believe the question, Jin'taan, you can correct me, was this successful at rewarding mid to length gameplay sessions above other types, or like shorter gameplay sessions?
No, I was asking is, does it give kind of like those same rewards, like the same rewards that you would expect for longer term mission? Like, I don't know like the specific mechanics of it, but I know that if I want to like run 2 or 3 anomalies, it's not super efficient. You have to kind of get into the routine of doing it, and you have to set up a lot of things. You know, and it's only rewarding over a long period of time. I wanted to know if the scope network was effective in giving people who want to just like log in 30 minutes a day, 1 hour a day, whatever, you know, not every day a week, if they were helping to reward that kind of gameplay activity for, say, more casual players.
Yeah, I think I know exactly what you're meaning. Does it reward someone who logs in and plays 10 hours in half-hour chunks about the same as someone who logs in 10 hours and does a 10-hour chunk? Is that about what you mean?
Yeah. Does it reward distributed gameplay time?
I don't think it does.
I don't either.
Okay, well that's interesting feedback to bring to CCP. So
I got a question. If you
go
like to
ahead.
really quick. Yeah, I was just wondering how people thought about this. One of the things I thought about for these events, suggesting, and I know you don't like solutions, but this is something that I was just thinking about. What if they just made the events things where it's like, we're going to reward you, but it's on a rolling once a week window. So it's like, it might take you a little while, but after a week, you'll have to wait till the next week to get it. And the reasoning behind that is that then you can give rewards to people without making it so that the rewards are only dedicated to lifers who sit there for, as you said, like 20 hours straight.
So wouldn't an example of this be the skill, I've forgotten what they were in the Crimson Harvest, where you could have a booster, but you couldn't activate more than one to get more than one bonus?
Okay.
Yeah, it's more just in terms of like when you're trying to run these PvE things and you're talking about the rewards, like they basically, the way CCP did it was they opened it up to like, this is what the levels are. Good luck trying to get it. It's going to take this long, and you do the math and it's like, well, yeah, you could either do it all at once or you could do it over a spread out period of time. But let's be honest, like it's going to be the people who do it just sit there lifers like nonstop that are going to get the rewards.
I mean,
whereas
Crimson Harvest was nice for chunky gameplay, Like you'd actually have people going, I have 5 minutes, but I might as well grind. Like, for example, we live in a wormhole, right? We always had those sites spawning. So you'd have people just go, oh, right, I have like 10 minutes. I'm going to log on, run the site real quick, maybe get my booster, then I can plug the booster, and then I'm done. But it didn't overly incentivize just like grinding it all day because there's only so much you can get from the boosters.
Yeah, it was.
That's
great
very
for that.
interesting then.
That's what
Because
I would
that's
say.
something that I think there needs to be more of in EVE in general. More sites that you should, you can just log on. I want to log on, do a thing, talk to people for maybe 10-15 minutes, and then log off.
But you mentioned anomalies and everything like that to get the best reward out of them. I've had plenty of times, especially the last couple of months, where my gameplay has been kind of disrupted by my job, and I get in and I run a couple of havens. Sometimes I get escalation, sometimes I won't, and I can put it down as I please. I didn't have to feel like, oh wow, if I stop now, I'm not gonna get anything. Or with the last event, it was kind of like, oh man, if I stop, I need to go to sleep, but if I stop now, I still got 2 more sites to find. Oh.
Okay, that's cool.
So here's a question though. On the opposite side, one of the things that's important is creating good stopping points in gameplay, right? So people burn out if you don't provide good stopping points. Do you feel that there was good stopping points within it? Do you feel like you could ever feel accomplished enough to log out? Or did it just drag you on perpetually? Because most people have referred to it as a grind, and that usually is a term that is described on a feature that doesn't let you go.
Well, I mean, the problem with that is that, like, as far as I'm aware, like, every site pays you the same, right? Like, in terms of points or whatever, it rewards you the same. So there's always that draw to do just one more site for the same reward.
That's actually not true, though.
No, it isn't. I'm not sure. Like, I'm just guessing here because I never did the scope network, so I'm gonna seat you in that. Like, what was the reward system like in quick terms, in terms of the points?
In quick terms, you had to complete the entire mission in order to get points, and the mission was to do a certain number of sites. So only your 5th site or your 10th site gave you the reward.
Right, but that actually gives you exit points because after the 10th site, you have an exit point.
That is your only point, and then after 2 days, it goes away.
Yeah, but the question is how long does it take you to find 10 sites? I mean, I also can see that being frustrating. Because
that's actually right. I'm going to cut in there on the whole finding sites. That's something that I think should be addressed. Is the difficulty of locating stuff, because exploration, like to actually just go and check systems and stuff in EVE, is not as entertaining as it might be in other games.
But I have to jump through 15 gates, and I might find one site which someone else is running. So that's the problem which I ran into.
Can anybody answer the question from who has actually done the event? Then, do we have anybody here who was an active participant in the Scope Network and got the gold or something?
I was an active participant. I didn't get that far.
Okay, but so do you feel that there were good termination points? Did you ever feel like it was the end of the night, you push yourself, and then you're like, okay, good, I'm done, and then you can log off?
There were definitely termination points when you managed to complete stuff, but they feel like they were too far apart. Like, I do these 2, and now I might have to do another 7 because I know I'm not going to play tomorrow.
So the point is that you feel
really
forced.
Have to push it. Yeah, and as I said, sometimes finding the sites, you can go 17 jumps and you find one which someone else has just completed.
Can I just do a comparison then with regards to the Scope Network and Crimson Harvest? Can everyone just put a C in CSM channel if you took part in the Crimson Harvest?
And if we can't log in?
Just say C, fuck it.
C.
Okay, and people who actively completed one got I don't know, a bronze for Scope Network, put an S in the channel.
Can you describe the C's and S's?
Crickets.
Yeah. So you can see obviously the difference in barrier to entry there.
Well, I can't, but
that's very big. Well, there was a flood of C's. There was, we went well above sea level, and then we had 4 S's.
Yeah, I think a huge point of it comes down to the Crimson Harvest. To participate, you did one site, done.
Also SP. SP
Yeah.
is a huge drop.
That
Yeah.
was pre-injectors though, so
Yeah, but still, I participated because it gave me more SP, because SP was at the time even more valuable, because there was
The-
only so much you could get.
The reward
If-
for the Crimson Harvest sites, there was a market for those injectors, and then there was other drops as well. That there was a lot more worth for each site, or potential for each site, compared to the drops and the drop rates from the scope networks.
And
Okay.
to participate, it was like 10 minutes flat, done.
all right. Well, I'm glad we compared that with I'm glad we compared those two. That's actually really quite valuable. So I want to just briefly touch on some other areas of PvE because we've been going for nearly 2 hours, and I recognize that some people have these terrible things called lives that they might need to get on with.
Blasphemy.
Never heard of it.
Okay, so how do people feel anomalies are in high sec, low sec, null sec? Just like anyone want to say some things on there?
I don't see many people running low sec anomalies at all.
I don't see many high-sec anomalies being run, except by people who are just going, and I clear all of them out.
I'm going to
It's
correct
not
you on that.
lots of people, it tends to be 1 or 2 people.
Right, but I
The
don't.
only time I'd go ahead.
Sorry, I'm gonna. Being a person, one of the few people that I think run around in high sec anomalies, I think that it might be few, but it's also like there is a rewarding gameplay there. I think there's fewer because it is a hidden gem in the game. Like Johnny
Oh,
Pugh
yeah,
does a
I
lot of stuff
like
with it and whatnot, and a lot of people don't understand how the escalation system works. So maybe if it was more clear as to what was happening in those sites and what was the potential in them, then they might be more popular.
I mean, if
Oh,
I may
God.
offer my perspective as a player that doesn't do them, my glance perspective on them is they pay like 600,000 ISK and that's it. I don't understand how escalations work, so obviously I'm missing something here. So maybe it's just a perception issue.
Exactly.
Some can pay significantly more than that. And then you've got
The ones
bloody
I
jet
find
set
typically
hooligans.
don't pay much.
So to put it into perspective, I made about 500 million ISK in about an hour to 2, or 1 or 2 hours of work for over a course of a week, like several days. So
If I could. So one of the things that's possible is that you get a lot of accounts, you multi-box them using drones and stuff, and you go through high sec and you clear 30 systems and you collect anomalies, the escalations, and I don't think that's really good gameplay.
that wasn't what I did. I mean, I guess there are other people that do that, but that isn't the only gameplay there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I've done, anomalies in every space and everything. And, my main thing is running anomalies in nullsec. And one of the things I wanted to say is one of the best things that they've done recently was the capital spawns in anomalies and, of course, belts and other places. But it really did, it spiced things up. It's kind of like, oh, well, now I have to refit my ships to not blow up when the dread shows up in a haven or a sanctum. I have to bring in friends or either get in a carrier or get my buddy in a carrier and say, hey, could you come and kill this for me? And so it actually created some cooperative gameplay with that, that wasn't there before. And then on top of that, I once had a dread spawn a couple of weeks ago that I was doing an anomaly. I killed the last ship in that spawn. The next spawn had a dread in it, and just then a guy in the Stratios landed on me, and the dread killed him. So I mean, that was memorable. One thing that I would suggest about anomalies across the board is the high sec anomalies need to be a little bit beefier because they all. I mean, keep the ones that are frigates for new people because that's a very low barrier to entry and they can get an escalation and they're asking, what's this? They're looking online, they're trying to figure it out. But maybe a little bit beefier for the more experienced people in high sec to experience, just cruisers or something like that. Just,
One random thing about that, since you said new people, I wonder if there's some way we can make it so that new players always get an escalation on their first site. Because there is the danger that somebody runs a high sec escalation, high sec anomaly, doesn't get an escalation, and then goes like, well, this wasn't worth my time, and then never looks at anomalies again.
Well,
I
if we do
disagree.
that, then you kind of leave the impression that every site will give a
No, it's just
escalation.
if it's only once, then you have no you have no reference frame. You just escalated the first time, you got lucky, and then it doesn't escalate next time. Well, okay, it's random, right?
And like
if you only do it
overnight,
once,
thousands of alpha clones are created.
Yeah.
Yeah,
One of
okay,
the things,
true,
though,
but yeah.
but there's no, like, when you look at the new player experience, it leads you towards missions, or it did, with the old one. It led you towards missions, it led you towards mining, but anomalies were just out there, and it did, and nobody ever told you anything about them. And I didn't find out about anomalies until, and they were different when I started, but I didn't find out anomalies until I'd gone out to low sec and said, oh, wait a minute, there's anomalies in high sec too, I mean, what, So, but yeah, they can be very good because they just appear on your scanner. You can warp to them and everything like that. They could be very good content for new people, but in their present form, they're kind of like, what's the point?
One of the problems I had as a new player was that low sec, because I moved to low sec pretty much straight away. I know 6 months compared to the average of a long time. I found that the low sec anomalies in a ship where you don't go online to see what the anomaly's got in it. Like if you just warp in, the low sec anomalies are really quite powerful, and you'll just get obliterated. Whereas high sec anomalies, they're scaled well for a new player.
Mm-hmm. Oh, but about on the topic of escalations are very important. Everybody I know that runs anomalies, I mean, you get some people that run them in null sec just for the ISK or whatever. But just about most of the people that I know that run anomalies run them for the escalations. And escalations, the DD plexes and stuff, they're just like missions. They haven't been touched in a decade. And one of the things I'd like to see is new DEDs, or say that you're running a Forsaken Hub.
Basically, you're echoing the exact same thing that has been said about every other area of PvE, where you just want more new content for PvE. I get it.
Well, yeah, just maybe something different every once in a while or something like that, because I mean, you run a Forsaken Hub, you get escalation, it's going to be fleet staging point.
Jin, can I just ask if there's going to be a DD section later?
I was planning to just briefly touch on combat sites, but yeah, I don't really know much. I literally know.
I've got one point about the thing that was mentioned with sites as eliminating you instantly because you have no idea what you're warping into. What about a simple show info on the anomaly that gives you a glance of what your ship's scanners can detect quickly from a distance, right? For example, a rough overview of what only the first wave is going to be, just so you have some idea of what you're getting into. Because right now, if I see a site in high sec on my anomaly scanner, it could be 3 frigates and a cruiser, or it could be a bunch of battleships that instantly kill me if I'm prepared for a ship and 3 frigates and a cruiser. A short summary of what I'm about to get into.
That's what they do with the DED sites with the 1 to 10 ratings, and I actually like that. It's quite good.
Yeah, but most the site, does it actually tell you the DED rating on the show info window?
Some do.
When
some
you
don't.
walk to it.
Okay.
Are those always gated? Because otherwise you could just land on top of stuff and die.
Yeah, they're always gated.
Yeah, DDs are always gated because they're Dead Space Enforcement Division sites.
Okay, yeah, but the regular common anomalies don't have that, right? You can warp in and just get obliterated because you were prepared for less than it has. So some sort of show info that just gives you.
As far as I'm aware, there's no sites in high sec that will just alpha you unless you're in an untanked frigate.
Yeah, but the reference was made to low sec, which I mean.
Oh yeah, true.
We don't want to desensitize new players from going to low sec.
I really like that idea.
Neville from the Twitch chat wants to say that it'd be awesome if there was a local effect to an Anom rating, so that you feel like you're more in the universe. So if you do ratting in the Anom, or if you kill things in an Anom, it'll have effects on the rats outside within the system.
Perhaps you could do this is complete massive spitballing, but I know that they're doing those Titan effect generators. Wouldn't it be interesting if I don't know, say no sec or low sec anomalies had those kind of things generated by their factions? So if you
almost like incursion effects where there's bad things happening and you have to go kill the bad guys to make the bad things stop happening.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. That's just complete spitballing. Like I said, I don't particularly have any ideas how that would work. Anyway. So belt ratting is something else I want to touch on. I know that there's been some stuff added with regards to the Mordus Legion stuff coming along the belt, so tags, that sort of thing.
Low-sec
So-
belt routing is probably the best it's ever been in terms of module sites and faction spawns and that stuff. I actually really like it a lot.
Belt routing in null is just so random that you might as well just do anomalies. So, I mean, you get very few people that I know that even do belt routing anymore, except to maybe survey the belts, see if there's a hollow spawn, maybe an officer spawn if you're right in the right space, or a dreadnought. But otherwise, screw it.
So do we think that is that a problem with the mechanic change to the chaining? We used to be able to chain belt rats to generate more and more of the battleships.
I mean, any sort of spawning mechanic that is like has a chance to give you nothing, that's like a decent chance to give you nothing, just ends up encouraging chains of nothing that just make you feel like you wasted your time, which is not good gameplay.
So basically, they're the upper element of how random is too random for it to be good gameplay.
I think there is too large a delta of random there. Like there is
But
too much of a difference between good and bad.
So
the difference is that the officer spawn, that's the only place you can get generate the officer spawns and are worth an amazing amount of money.
The dread spawn, same with the blueprints, right?
So the question is, does anybody disagree with that sentiment? It sounds like everybody who's spoken so far has said that belt ratting is not rewarding enough to do. Is there anybody who is...
In low-sec, I don't do it because DED sites are better money, but when I was a newer player and there are still guys in my alliance who do it, you can make a reasonable amount of money per hour by going through, a system, clearing all the good spawns, Mordus, faction, clone soldiers, and then keep going through that.
So that's actually...
I'd like to raise a counterpoint, and that's that actually nullsec belt ratting is one of the easiest activities that we can send like week to 2 week old new bros to do. Like we'll send them in a catalyst, they kill one battleship, and they're like, "Wow, this is more money than I've ever seen." Ah.
So that's a good question then. So is belt ratting the anoms for new players, and is that gameplay important? Because it sounds like I've heard that from 3 different people at this point.
I think it's too random for that as is. But I know that our Losa campus likes like forming up 4 clone soldiers. Like when there's a clone soldier, you'll find like 2 to 3 people and go kill them in like T1 ships. So that's a thing that happens, but I think it's a bit too random for it to be reliable gameplay for new players.
So it sounds like it's part of a solution, but not the solution itself.
It's definitely a good concept, but I think it would be a bit silly that the new player gameplay is far less reliable than the old player gameplay.
Okay.
Yeah, but we know what we're doing, and new players don't.
No, like in terms of how likely are you to actually find your content, because you're almost always going to find an anomaly in your nullsec system.
Yeah. But having a new bro like go and find what's this thing, and this thing killed me. And then,
But what's this
how
thing
many
only lasted
stories
so
have
long?
you heard about? Because I'm not gonna lie, I've heard a lot of stories about, hey, I got killed by this named rat. What is it? And then, God, that's an officer. That happens so very, very often that I actually, I can recall 3 or 4 stories about it.
Yeah, but it only takes so long for what is this to wear off before it just becomes, oh god damn it, I still haven't found a belt rat to kill.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you're not wrong. I'm not saying that belt ratting is good enough in its current state. What I'm saying is that many people were saying that it's pointless, and that is a dangerous, assumption to make. Just because it currently isn't rewarding doesn't mean that the engagement of belt ratting has no point.
No, I'm not saying it's pointless. I wouldn't agree with that.
Okay.
I would say that it is currently it has too high a tendency to feel like you wasted your time because there's no spawns.
Okay. So
it encourages long-term investment, really.
So it's disappointing.
It's long gameplay stuff. Right. Well, let's go on to combat sites then, DED stuff. I'd like to just have a quick... I know a couple of people had things they wanted to say about that.
I'm going to start. I don't think I've ever... Okay, I'm not going to swear. Drone DED sites are, as far as I can tell, completely worthless to run, ever. I've never done it in nullsec, but low-sec and high-sec never made any money.
They're not quite pointless, because you can get one of the drops which you use with the SOE LP store, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
In the DED sites.
I believe
Any of the sentient,
Yeah,
any
in
of
the
the
scan-
sentient spawns have a chance of dropping a Sviv next chip.
But aren't the drone DD sites older than the sentient spawns?
They added
I've
them
never
in.
seen one.
They added them in. No. Like this, I actually had this happen. I scanned down a site. It was a drone site, and I was like, oh gosh. But it was in my home system, so I was like, I'm just going to clear it out. And it was like basically already halfway done. So I just went in, finished the last boss real quick, and it dropped a chip for a Stratios. So that's a thing that happens.
That was a nice addition, but I still think that the drone DED sites that are bypassed a lot more. Like even the low sec 5 out of 10.
I agree.
The 5 out of 10.
There's a chance of that rare drop. I think we need more rare drops, like in the terms of like the sentient drone, like the drone damage amplifier, those type of things.
Control.
The damage control. We need more valuable loot in the RNG tables to make those sites, desirable to run. Whereas right now I'm going to go and hunt for a 5 out of 10 Sanchez site or a 5 out of 10 Serpentis site instead, because I know that the loot tables have a better chance of dropping something valuable. The drone sites, the most of the value, as far as I understand, is from the Overseer's effects, which are, I think all the Overseer's effects need to bump up, or at least the low level ones.
I agree with that. The level 1 to 4 Overseer's effects, it's 1 million for the GED 4 out of 10. That's not worthwhile.
It's not worth the space in my cargo hold.
The 3 out of 10 actually has a higher level OSE than the 4 out of 10s do.
The 3 out of 10s have also got like 500 frigates in, and that's a complete pain in the ass.
Yes, it is. They are the longest site to run. Personally, for me, in terms of dead sites and even in the unrated, but mostly dead sites, they took a significant hit when the escalation chance got changed. And
Agreed.
They got hit really hard to the point where in nullsec, it's if you're in soft null, it's not worth scanning. Just go and grind out your anoms or buy escalations from other people, because it's not worth scanning your own space.
I disagree that it's not worth scanning your own space, because other Explo is actually really worthwhile. But
For combat deads, though, it's not worth hauling your combat tune out to go run a combat dead. In terms of relics and datas, yes, that's worth it. But going to try and find combat deads, I don't find worth it.
Okay.
In nullsec, you're saying?
Yeah,
you're much better off just buying an escalation off somebody else.
Yeah, I think
and just chaining those together.
The biggest problem with nullsec exploration is that it's a sudden breakaway from the rest of exploration, in the fact that it requires completely different equipment than basically anywhere else, right? Because you can't do it in Stratios. You have to get specialized equipment that's slower or way more expensive. I feel like it breaks away from the engagement of everything else a little bit too much for people to shift into effectively.
Okay. Hey Emma, you said that you wanted to say something. Have you spoken?
Yes, that was me.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, lots of voices here today.
No, I just had one thing to say about DD sites, and my beef with them. I do a lot of anomalies, so I end up doing a lot of 10-10s. I did 10-10s all over, and it's at the point now where every single one of them is soloable by a single ship. And originally DD 10-10s are supposed to be group content. They're supposed to be, you got to bring a fleet to do this. But now it's like, you want to do a maze, get an Ishtar. You want to solo Blood Raider Naval Shipyard, bring a Vargar with a micro jump drive and jump past the station. They're too easy, and that's part of the problem.
They're a solved problem. Once again, we have this before. Yeah, it's always the same deal, right? If you balance the site to be challenging group content on difficulty alone on release, then it becomes a solved problem that can be solved. While if you make it a thing that will be group content while it's solved, then it's too difficult at start and you never do it.
Yeah, there was talk earlier about potential solution there where, if something gets solved and lots of people do it, it stops giving out ISK, but that still doesn't solve and that makes it kind of a competition to see who can solve it first, gets the most money. And I think that's pretty interesting, but the problem is that puts effectively an expiry date on the content, which from CCP's side is not good investment.
I will say this, though, that in some cases, some of the decisions that CCP made added to that problem. For instance, with the DD10s, it used to be that every one of them shot a EM Citadel torp at you, so you couldn't just run it with it. If you did a maze, you couldn't just run it with an Ishtar. You had to run it with something that could tank EM as well as kinetic and thermal. Well, they changed that to where every DD10 does the racial type to you. The maze shoots a kinetic Citadel torp at you. Now it's easy to run in an Ishtar just by yourself, you know. So,
Okay.
you know, all I'm pointing out that, you know, there are simple things that can be done without, you know, totally revamping every site to say that, hey, you know, so this is not something that you do in 10 minutes or 15 minutes with a single hack, you know. Because it used to not be like that. It used to, well, I'm gonna have to bring something, or I'm gonna have to bring Logi or something.
Okay, that's
On a
Go ahead.
different topic, I'm sure people can report with the other pirate sites, unrated sites they've run, but some like the provisional Angel outpost and some of the other Angel sites, they have spawns 200, 300 kilometers away compared to each other. And that's just a time waster, really. There's no value, there's no gameplay there that's not fit at MWD and just walk through them or fit a micro jump drive.
That's a really good
complete
point.
waste of it's a waste.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of sites that have really long like distance spawns, and I know that some of us worked around it using micro jump drives, but there's a lot of sites that could have those ranges reduced because it doesn't really add any additional gameplay.
Yeah, every race has a unrated site called base, like Garista's base, Angel base, and they all do the same thing. They spawn stuff way far out, and it just takes them a while for you to get there, you know. And it's not really, you know, say, oh, I scanned down a base. Anybody want it? No.
That was going to be my question, is like, how do you guys find the unrated dead complexes? Are they worth doing? They have a chance of escalating to other sites, like there's like a 5-part series that you can get out of those. I don't find them usually worth running in a lot of cases. I don't know how you guys feel
Can
about
you
them.
give an example of the site you mean?
Well, like the Angel Base or the
Fortress.
Yeah, Angel Fortress, drone. There's a bunch of drone ones too.
Those are
In
nullsec
nullsec,
ones,
no.
right? I run a Radiance, which is one of the drone unrated sites, and it was a bit crap, really.
Well, the problem I have with the unrateds in null is, okay, so you got that one and you have a shot at faction loot only until you get to the final escalation. And to get to the final escalation, you have to escalate it between 3 and 4 times, which is not guaranteed. And you're also up to 40 jumps from where you started. So you're having to go up to 40 jumps away from where you started into hostile space to complete the escalation chain.
To be
Oh,
fair,
that's
40
something-
is pretty unlikely though.
Isn't that something CCP wants, though, for you to travel around outside your space?
They reduced the jump range for escalations in
All right,
the
well-
last change.
They did
All right.
reduce the jump range, but the thing about it is that each jump in a chain is treated as its own thing. For instance, if you get fleet staging point, you're gonna go and do the first escalation. The next one could be another 9 jumps away. The next one after that could be another 9 jumps away. You know.
And it is, I have seen, it's more often than not, they are on the upper end of the 6 to 10 jumps away than the 5 to 1 jumps away. They are very rarely in that lower bracket. They're almost always 6 to 10 jumps away.
Can I just ask how everyone feels about escalations as a mechanic, though?
I love them. I live off of them. I mean, it's kind of like going to the casino. You know, you're doing something. Yeah, you're making this off of doing an anomaly or something like that. But you get that escalation, and it not only, you know, it's I can get, you know, some more loot and everything like that, but it breaks up the monotony.
I'd just like to see a way to sell or trade those escalations a lot easier and quicker, because like if I jump out a wormhole and I can like take a little trip around lowsec, I might get spawn 5 or 6 of those escalations and not have time to run them. I'd love to put them up on a board and let somebody else run them and make the money off of them and send me some cash.
I mean, the problem is also that these have always like moving 40 jumps is maybe something CCP wants. The problem is you always have to contrast that to the reliable, safe, one position income of anomalies or missions, At which point people stop doing them because they always prefer the easier, more reliable method.
One of the things that happens with, where I'm at is like you have the choice of running, Forsaken hubs, or you can run Havens and Sanctums, whatever. And people almost always choose the Havens because if you get a Haven escalated, it escalates to a regular DED 1010, which is 9 to 2 jumps away. But if you get the one that you get from the Forsaken hub, you could be 27 jumps away. So it ends up, with people just not even doing that content at all because it's just easier to do the one that's going to be closer anyway.
Well, that's an interesting point, but here's another side to that, which is that, yeah, the top dog, the guy that's going to run those sites can go do that, but that leaves the other sites, the sites that escalate to other things that you may not prefer. Those sites are now open for other people who may not care about what it escalates to as much. Or maybe there may be a different group of people who think that other escalation, I mean, I haven't done it myself, but maybe the further away escalation is worth more, so people want to do it for a different reason.
They're not typically, because you at least get an Overseer's effect from a dead site, like a 10 out of 10 or 9 or 8 out of 10, whereas the unrated sites have a chance of a faction loot drop, and that's it. So you could go those 40 jumps and end up with nothing.
Yeah,
awesome.
And you also have to get the final escalation. You can do 2 or 3 escalations going out whatever distance, if it's 3 jumps or 30 jumps. You can do all of those. You don't get that last escalation. You have the low drop chance for faction items, and now you have to slow boat your way all the way back.
I have to say, if CCP was willing to change something, it would be that, if you get a 2-part escalation, it will escalate all the way to the 4 parts. It's just a pain in the ass to go 3 times and get, well, so now I've got some drone cerebral fluid and some drone crap, and that's just a pain, I'm doing the work here.
Okay.
Can I not get
You want to buy
rewarded?
some of my drone crap? I got a can full of it.
Well, here's the
I'll
thing.
just trash it.
All right. Well, can we move on from this? Like I said, I just want to ask if there are any topics we've missed before I start to think about cutting the recording. We've got about 2 hours of very, very good, very productive discussion here, and I want to thank everyone for not massively shitting up everything. I was really expecting I was really expecting this to become a shouting match, and I'm really happy to see that everyone wants to work together to kind of make things work, and I'm happy with that. So
I got a quick question, really quick. This is kind of just a question that I'm curious for the people here in the room. If you had a choice for CCP and you had a choice on how they want to focus making future PvE content, should it be A, on making it profitable yet balanced, or should it be focused on making PvE content that is entertaining? Because those are not the two same things.
You need entertaining content while incentivizing people that are focusing on profit to do it.
Right,
Because
the thing is,
you're not going to get people to do content that is more entertaining if it's less profitable.
Well, we have a complete counterpoint to that, which is the Drifter incursions.
Yeah.
I think that they have novelty value, but I don't think that it's continuing value. So there are sites that I'll run once or twice. So like that Radiant site, I'd never done it before. I want to run all of the unrated sites in Eve. That's my challenge. But I'll do it once. It didn't work out. I'm not going to do it again.
But the question
they
is
have a one-off value for me of, okay, I haven't done this before. Let me try it out. Okay, I tried it out. That's cool. I might do it again in a couple months because if I find myself bored. But I'm not going to go back to just doing that just because it's slightly more interesting than the missions the items that I'm doing that are worth a lot more.
Well, let me question an assumption there. Should all of PvE have replay value? Or should there be PvE things that don't have replay value, that you're expected to do for the experience, and then, you move on?
PvE content.
You mean like Cosmos missions?
Sure.
The PvE,
Speaking
PvE
of that,
content...
I'd like to read out a question from Winter I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce Archipelago. Fucking hell. I've never heard that word ever said by a human being.
What?
I've only read it. Well, when does archipelago when does that word come
Keep trying, you'll get it.
Ego.
Spell it out.
It's a
spell it
chain of
out.
islands.
I know what it is. I played Civilization, but
I was born in Hawaii, so I heard it out loud.
okay. And he asks, when are Cosmos missions going to be fixed or finished? And it's an interesting point.
I
From what I've
suspect
heard-
never.
Not with 39.5-foot pole. They don't want to touch Cosmos. They just don't want to mess with it.
The thing is simply that non-replayable content is simply not worth it in terms of development time versus.
I don't think that that's what the
like,
message
gameplay.
is. I think that the message is that Cosmos missions are broken beyond what they feel can be recovered. That doesn't mean that new content that is one-off couldn't be produced.
No, it's still a matter of that new content would not be worth it in terms of development time investment versus gameplay out.
Well, the thing is
I
that
will say
Cosmos
ahead.
missions are replayable. It's once every 6 months or something, but it's there to be done, and you can
Nope,
do it.
you can't
No.
redo it. Never.
Really? Oh,
But-
I'm sorry.
but-
Only once
That's
per
Epic
turn.
Arcs.
My question wasn't about the specifics. My question is there a place in PvE in EVE for content that isn't designed to be played to death, but it's just designed to be experienced and said that you've done it and knock it off?
Is there a place for it? Sure. Is it worth developing? No.
Well,
don't even think it's worth-
I'm a big fan of lore, and I think that's where a lot of the lore should be focused for those type of events and experiences.
Yeah,
That's
but,
my opinion.
Yeah, but
maybe
having good lore in your event doesn't preclude it being replayable.
the epic arcs are replayable, and
I'm-
they're fine.
I'm not saying that it can't be replayed, but I'm saying that several times during this conversation, people brought up the fact that it can't be run to death as a reason why it is bad by default. And what I'm suggesting is that there may be certain things that are do not need to be balanced around being done indefinitely. Like, it might be okay that there's a DAD site that you go and run to say that you've done every DAD site, but other than that isn't the most profitable one. I don't think that every site has to be equal in its reward. There can be less rewarding ones that people eventually tend to move away from, but that doesn't make them not valuable in the design space.
My problem is that I can't think of a situation where I would go, I've done this site, and that's good. I'll never do it again. There's no
I'm not going to put
There's-
that in my bio that, I completed every DD site. I just don't care. I've done a
Yeah,
lot
me
of them,
neither.
but I don't care enough to say I'm going to go out and finish every DED site in the game.
Well, I mean, some players might, but the thing is, at that point, you're intentionally developing a site to be less valuable. Why would you do that?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you are just designing it in such a way that you're not so obsessed with everything being the same valuable.
You shouldn't be, because you're not going to manage that anyway.
Well, you can't guarantee that everything's got the same value. But
Yeah.
in the same
just-
general area of value, that's good enough for me.
And as Juliet points out, things like level 1, level 2 missions do not get run particularly frequently by higher
Well, I
level
mean,
players,
come on.
although
we
they are going to.
We tell our new players, train connections to level 3 so you can skip level 1s, they're pointless.
That's a shame.
But to
They're
new
quite
players,
interesting.
they are valuable. They teach very fundamental piloting skills. They teach
What
very
do they
interesting
teach
things
that
about the
level
lore.
2 doesn't teach?
What do you mean?
They teach at a lower price, which is a benefit.
Okay. So the interesting thing is, how do you guys feel that level 2, level 3 missions are going to treat alpha clones, for example?
Caracals are your friend?
Yeah.
Well, there's going to have to be
I mean,
a
that's-
solution for every
that's-
race.
Hey,
Yeah, that's the thing. But yeah, the answer for a lot of alpha clone questions right now is, well, I hope you're Kaldari.
Yeah, but Fozzie did say that you'd be able to use a Gnosis as an alpha clone, so
That
Yeah,
seems
but
like
you
a
won't be able to
dumb idea to
train
me.
rapid missile launchers, which are kind of the thing that's
Yes, you will.
strong there.
Yes, you will. Meta
Not
rapid
everyone.
Meta rapid lights
Oh,
are
for
very.
all-
Oh, you mean? Yeah, I mean that's
for
what I
all
said.
races,
If
I
you
meant.
Kaldari, yeah,
No, I
If
meant
you
for all
Kaldari, you're
races. Yeah.
yeah, it's an issue with skills.
Okay, so well, that's probably more of an issue than rapid lights in general, but still.
But that's an issue with alpha balance mostly, and not just with missions and specifically. Like alpha balance will be broken if you only let him fly ships.
But again, this
be
is
honest-
coming from the philosophy that the best way to run it is the most efficient way. If there is other ways to experience it that's also valuable, then that's going to be, there's a new level of okayness. Like, one of the things that's good is that each race, even though like it sucks to be an Amar pilot, especially if you're in like Galente space, in Amar space, the enemies are actually still vulnerable to you. So for most people who are doing low tier content, I'm not going to say new player content, but low tier content, alpha tier to content, are probably going to be facing things that they're designed to fight better.
The Coracle has selectable damage type and still more DPS. That's the problem.
Okay.
The Kaldari is gonna the Caracal is gonna be effective against
Bring that-
whatever you're fighting.
I would say let's raise that kind of stuff in the discussion threads for the alpha clones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not really relating to PvE. I mean, it does, but let's. I wanted to ask if there was any other portions we wanted to cover. Like the exploration stuff is a big part for me, but I can talk about that separately with you, Jin'taan, if that's easier.
I do.
Yeah,
that.
that would be easier.
there.
And
That's a
well,
long conversation about that, so I think that should be separate.
yeah, I may end up just doing like a whole. Well, we might. I don't know if we want to do a Q&A or something after the summit or something like that, just to try and get in contact with people with regards to whatever. But it seems like, are there any other topics we want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to.
No, go on, Ash.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up one other thing because this is kind of important, and it could be a really big deal. So remember, there's a new AI coming as well, or there should be a new AI coming based on this drifter stuff and other pieces of it. And I think that one of the goals of PvE really needs to be, or it needs to be that the space between the two needs to be as thin as possible. Rats need to follow the same rules that players do in as the game plays out, so that way players can get used to the way rules work. Then PvE becomes a training ground for PvP instead of a place to like lose people into the abyss, right?
Yeah, but rats are never going to adapt to a player.
No, I'm not saying adapt. I'm saying when I newt a rat, it should have
Rules-wise,
effect
yes.
on their
Yes,
capacitor. It should be like
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, I've been saying this for a while.
But the
If
thing
Eve is going to be the
CCP
dark,
wants that. CCP wants that, but they can't because the engine does not currently support it. So that's a lot of development time being sunk into that support.
Right, and that's
I
what
disagree
they're
with
doing. So
I disagree with the assumption that PvE should be exclusively a training ground to get
No,
people into
that's
PvP.
not what we're saying. The point he's trying to make, I think, is simply that the mechanics should work the same in both areas because otherwise you're breaking player expectation.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can agree
Yeah.
with that.
yeah, I'm
I
not.
misunderstood what you
understand
said.
that, but the problem with that is that, PvP is a little bit more winner take all. That's why you see in like the burner missions, if somebody doesn't bring a Griffin alt and everything like that, they bring something that, has, for instance, a lot of buffer or whatever like that. You get more freedom, I think, in PvE because you have more choices because the rats aren't that smart about killing you. And for some of us, that's the fun part of PvE, being able to do different things. If we had to do the same thing, like in PvP, there's only so many things that work.
No, I'm not saying that you have to fit up like a PvP pilot. What I'm saying is that rats should not jam from 80 kilometers away because that teaches that people can be jammed from 80 kilometers away. Rats shouldn't be immune to newts because that teaches that newts don't do anything.
If I newt a rat, it should stop repping. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Like that is otherwise you just teaching raw mechanics. That's really a point that is true, but that is really a legacy code issue. I mean, as far as I know, CCP actually wants to do that. The problem is the engine doesn't support it, and there is only so much they can do in rewriting it.
That's fine. Again, this is a matter of stating problems, right? So I'm saying that the community still support. I think that is a important thing.
Yes. Like
But I can agree
teaching
with that,
correct, making NPCs actually match playerships in not performance obviously, but in behavior. So having them have the same behavioral patterns to it, like you said, you can only jam out to so far, or you can only shoot to so far, instead of having like Agoristas rat jam me from 300 kilometers.
It's also important. It could help teach you something about the races, especially like a vigilant should act like a vigilant as opposed to whatever.
But then you'd need some way to convey that it's a vigilant.
Well, it is. It's that's.
model
The
in
problem with
spaces.
Yeah,
that
but
is that then
also
you end
Apprentice
up with
Cruisers.
like literally no fun being able to be there's no sig tanking or anything because you've got 90% webs, which people generally
yeah,
don't
but
use.
Again,
no,
no,
like,
what I'm
you're
saying is
just
that you can scale the
teaching-
power. I'm not saying it'd be as powerful as us using a Vigilant. That's the whole theme of this game, is that we get more out of the ships than they do. But they should, I mean, like, if their bonuses are webbing, then maybe that should be more of what they do.
I disagree with the notion of there shouldn't be 90% webs because it's boring. No, that they just have to be appropriately balanced so that small ships can
Alright.
then have other engagement profiles for the same encounter because they just try to get the 90% webs off grid.
I feel
Okay.
like you'd run into the issue that you had with faction warfare missions, which is where, you know, you could easily just do it in a bomber, and so nobody ever used anything but a bomber. And in this case, it would be, you know, you can't. Okay, that was not what I meant to say. If you, you know, you could do it for one race where it was easy to do it
Except
within the bomber,
the
and
frigates
then
might, like, you just have to balance it appropriately so that the ships have countermeasures for bombers the same way players do. I mean, if you fight a
the
bomber in
problem
a
was that
battleship, the drone's gonna murder you.
the problem was that there was only like one ship. There was 2 races that had webs.
the
Sorry, well,
Galente
there was
were
one
of them,
race that
I
had
think,
webs.
or
No, it was
cut-
Mimitar had webs. No one else did, and
Well,
that
if
made
you, no, I'm
that
sorry.
made everything not as interesting.
Just make it different webs though. Like they have like everybody has 60% webs and some races 90% webs, which matches what the players have.
Yeah.
All
I
right,
think you're
well,
all wrong. Only thing that you need to do in PvE to get it to feel like PvP is get the NPCs to talk shit to you in local when they.
I would actually love more shit talking.
Yeah,
in local from NPCs.
we could need that. I mean, some of them do that. Like, but like when the room spawns, some NPCs will shit talk you in local. More of that would be fun.
Yeah.
It's low development investment and pretty fun actually.
if I could raise something that going way back to how much like engagement you need for multi-boxing a site versus group PvPing a site. One of the sites that doesn't ever get much of a mention, but I think is, you know, quite a good example of that is the Dayton Relic ghost sites. So you've got 4 containers and, you know, people will cheat by scanning them. But if you don't know how to scan them, then you'd have to take a guess on which container is the best. And you can really only run one container effectively. But if you have 4 players, you can run every single container and get all the loot.
But that's mostly tied to the relic hacking thing being a mini game that you have to focus on.
Yeah, but if doing a PvE site required that same level of attention, you couldn't multi-box it.
So basically,
That's
what you're
I'm trying to
saying is, if you had, say, a site that was intended to be run by 4 people, so you had 4 cans at the end of it, you pick one can and it blows up. But if you all pick one at the same time, then you get 4 times the loot, basically.
For example, yeah.
Okay, that's an
But
interesting concept.
while we're on ghost sites, just a quick note: can we maybe make it so that ghost sites are a bit more obvious to a new player, like what they're gonna do to them? Because right now they just blow up in your face with pretty much no warning, or little warning at least.
There's the
Pop
get
up
out
on
of here
warp.
person in the local chat, but people don't really care for that.
Yeah, nobody reads, like nobody knows it's in local chat, and the pop-up most people don't read. So there
I've
needs to
seen
be
so-
some way.
Well, at that point, then we've got to just accept that some people are going to be dumb.
The problem is, it's not some people; it's most people.
Yeah, I think that
Well, if you-
I think that
we have a
better
very
notification
regular-
of chat from the mission itself would be good. Like the pop-up dialogues
Yeah.
and the local chat, I don't think either of them are the best solution for it.
Or make it like multiple pop-ups, because that kind of breaks the pattern. Like having one fluff pop-up when you start a site is normal. You just learn to ignore that. If you get like multiple and it has like a warning icon or whatever, people would read it. Because
Actually-
then it breaks the normality.
I'm going to suggest
a
putting it
question.
into the notification panel, so that way I can open it up as many times as I want to. I can read it at my leisure. It's like they sent me an Eve mail. You know, like the rat
not
like
immediate.
sends me a little Eve mail saying I'm going to kill you now.
No. I mean about ghost sites, like the actual, like the fact that they're gonna blow up in your face randomly. That is not communicated well to new players right now.
So here's the
Because we
question:
regularly-
is that bad, right? Like,
Yes.
but hold on, is when you're learning about what Eve is all about, and you warp to a site and it just explodes because you didn't pay attention, you didn't know where you're going into, you've been punished for not knowing. You can either see that as
Yes,
a
but
way.
you don't realize that. You go like you end up being confused because you don't understand what happened. You don't
That is-
understand that it's a punishment for whatever.
I-
You just feel cheated.
I was gonna say one thing about that is I would say if they wanted to make it a trial by fire where we're gonna throw you in this and we're not gonna give you the information in terms of why things are doing, that would be acceptable if it wasn't like Eve where when that happens you lose everything
Right.
and then you're just left like, what the fuck just happened?
It breaks player expectations.
I think
that's the
that
problem.
what would be another way to look at it is the feedback after the fact of why this all happened would also be good, because it's like when you're crawling through a dungeon, there's a reward for there can be traps, and if you're just staggering through life, you're going to hit one of the traps and they're going to just get you, and if you're not paying attention, then you just don't know, and then afterwards you realize, oh, that's a trap. Okay, I know to avoid that in the future. And I think that the problem is that players walk away from that not knowing exactly what it is that they need to now avoid. They just know that they died.
Exactly.
Okay.
I just want to point out, guys, that there's a mission in the tutorial that blows you up for no reason other than to show you that that's part of the game.
Yeah, and people don't recognize that either.
Well, it's
Okay,
pretty.
well that's an MPE issue. That's like really getting out of the bounds of like even the ghost thing. That is just
Yeah.
an MPE
Like
issue.
a
That
lot of issues, just people like the thing is, it's player expectations meta level. When
Okay.
you see a pop up, it's like a quest text. A lot of people are just not gonna read it. That's the problem. Players are trained, like a lot of players are trained to not read quest text, and we're not gonna change that.
Not
Right.
just players, users in general do not read pop-ups.
Yeah,
I'm in support. I know this.
the problem is that the pop-ups in Eve are almost universally not rewarding, right? So even if you do read all of the pop-ups that do come up, none of them really give you anything that you need to know, and therefore you get out of the tendency of looking at them. If every pop-up was actually super important, you would actually potentially, more people would read them. There would still be those people that just click through and whatever, but the fact that you're inundated with them and large portions of them need to be ignored causes people to ignore even the important ones.
CCP did some really good work on some of the unrated complexes where before when you walked in you would get some flavor text that was completely not important. Now you get you walk into an angel outpost and it says blah blah blah, for good results shoot the structure. That the structure doesn't show up on your overview is a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, but there is still the user expectation that there is a pop-up as I walk to the site. This is meaningless fluff about the site, because for 90% of the sites it is.
Yeah.
Like you have to change that pattern to make it discernible to the user. For example, if after you land the site you suddenly get a pop-up with a flashing exclamation mark that says, "Oh, this site is going to blow up in your face," people are going to notice that a lot more because that's not a pop-up they usually get.
Well, yeah, and
Well,
that's the other
I'm
reason.
open to the
Hey,
site.
can we have that someone else started talking just as you did, Titus? Can they interject, please?
It's fine.
No, go ahead, Rancy.
No, go on.
I forgot what I was going to say. Too much interruptions. Dang it.
Sorry. Well, X up in the channel if you do think of it again. But yeah, this is becoming effectively a podcast between Ashtarothi and Titus, which is very funny. This is exactly how the original discussions on how we were going to run this went.
There is one more thing that you probably want to go to bed right now. I don't know if anybody else has run the besieged covert research sites. The Mordred's Legion ones around the Garista structure. I have the problem that I have, an 800 DPS Mac that tanks like, I don't know, quite a lot. I can't remember right now. I haven't got Piper on me. And I can't actually run the sites because the way they're structured with the 5 battleship spawn is that it's ridiculously strong. I'm not really asking, tell me how to run the site, but I'm raising it as an example of a site where, if there's what I think 2 or 3 different final second spawns, and some of them are just completely unrunnable for me, and that doesn't seem like a good thing.
Okay.
One of the things I had asked him in one of the revamps for that site was to make it a dead complex, like a scannable complex, not just an anom, or at least gate it so you have some kind of warning when you go in, because the site does web and scram you down pretty hard.
And it also
but there are ways to run it.
And it does almost imply, I know I've accidentally warped to it a few times, of, oh, this might be a ghost site, when ghost sites were anoms. No, it's actually a combat site.
Okay, well, I'm going to start. I'm going to wrap this up right here. We have been going for about 2.5 hours. It's been absolutely wonderful. And if anyone has just like, no, don't worry about shoutouts. I was in full podcast mode there asking if we wanted shoutouts. But yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for doing this and thank Eve Mumble for hosting this. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Eve University.
Huh? Eve
You
University?
said Eve Mumble.
Oh, fucking hell. Sorry, Eve University. Sorry, I apologize. It is fucking midnight at local time, so I am not fully awake. Thank you all for coming, and I will be posting this on Evo forums and Reddit. So if you have anything you would like to add on all of these subjects, please feel free to do so. Be very interested to hear dissenting opinions, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of them sent to me in mail.
Can I just say thank you to Jin and all the other people who set this up? This has been really, really helpful.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. It's been handy.
Okay, and recording has stopped, so feel free to call me a bunch of rude words now.